The auctioneer's gavel came down hard. Caleb Hayes watched 20 years of his father's legacy, the only thing standing between his kids and complete ruin, get sold to a bank representative in a cheap suit. But across town, in a glass tower that scraped the sky, Victoria Kane was making an announcement that would shatter her carefully constructed world. She was buying a husband, not for love, for survival. And the man she'd choose would be the last person anyone expected. A broke mechanic with calloused hands and 2 kids who didn't know their electricity might get shut off tomorrow. This is a story about what happens when desperation wears a billion-dollar suit and when pride is all you have left to bargain with. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, hit that like button and drop your city in the comments. Let's see how far this story travels. Now let's begin. The fluorescent lights in the county courthouse hummed with the kind of persistence that made Caleb's headache worse. He sat in the back row of the auction room, hands clasped between his knees, staring at the scuffed linoleum floor like it held answers. It didn't. Nothing did anymore. Lot 47, the auctioneer droned. Hayes Auto Repair, 1247 Route 9, including all tools, equipment, and real property. Starting bid, $75,000. Caleb's throat tightened. His father had built that shop with his bare hands in 1987. Taught Caleb everything under those fluorescent tube lights that never quite illuminated the corners. How to diagnose an engine knock by sound alone. How to treat customers with respect even when they couldn't pay on time. How to make a business mean something beyond profit margins. $75,000, a voice called from the front. Bank representative. Caleb recognized the type without looking up. Pressed shirt, forgettable face, no connection to the thing he was buying except as numbers on a spreadsheet. Going once. Caleb's fingers dug into his palms. He had $42,000 in available credit across 3 nearly maxed cards. Had already borrowed against everything that wasn't nailed down. His truck had 200,000 miles and a transmission that whined in 3rd gear. His house, his father's house, had a second mortgage that made his stomach hurt every time he thought about it. Going twice. He should stand up, should say something, should sold, oak. The gavel hit wood with a sound like a bone breaking. Caleb didn't move. Around him, people shuffled papers, gathered belongings, moved on to whatever came next in their lives. He sat there, 32 years old, and felt every single one of those years pressing down on his shoulders like wet concrete. His phone buzzed. Text from Sarah, his 13-year-old. Did you get it back? He stared at the screen. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. His daughter trying to figure out how to ask a question she already knew the answer to. Finally, "It's okay, Dad. We'll figure it out." 13 years old, and she was comforting him. Caleb locked his phone and stood up, his knees protesting. He was too young to feel this old, too old to start over with nothing. The drive back home took 15 minutes through autumn countryside that looked like a postcard. Rolling hills, trees turning colors that magazines paid photographers to capture. That perfect rural American dream that existed everywhere except in his bank account. He pulled into the gravel driveway of the farmhouse his grandfather had bought in 1956, back when a working man could still afford land. The porch light was on. Sarah always left it on for him, had ever since her mother walked out 2 years ago. Left a note on the kitchen counter that said she couldn't do this anymore. This being marriage, motherhood, small-town life, all of it. Last Caleb heard, she was in Arizona with a guy who sold timeshares and drove a Lexus. He sat in the truck for a moment, engine ticking as it cooled, trying to figure out what he was going to tell his kids. That they'd have to move? That he'd failed to keep the one thing his father had trusted him with? That sometimes trying your hardest just wasn't enough? The front door opened. Marcus, his 9-year-old, stood backlit in the doorway, still in his soccer uniform from practice. "Dad?" His voice carried across the yard, small and uncertain. Caleb got out of the truck. "Hey, buddy. You look sad." Kids. They could cut right through any defense you tried to build. "Just a long day. You win your game?" "We don't play until Saturday." Marcus hesitated, then ran down the porch steps and wrapped his arms around Caleb's waist. Just held on. Didn't ask questions, didn't need explanations, just knew his dad needed this. Caleb's eyes burned. He put a hand on his son's head, felt the sweat-damp hair from an afternoon of running around. "I love you, Mark." "Love you too." Sarah appeared in the doorway, backlit like her brother had been, but her silhouette was all sharp edges and defensive posture. She was 13, going on 30, had been forced to grow up too fast when her mother left. I made spaghetti. The sauce is from a jar, but I added the Italian seasoning like Grandpa used to. That sounds perfect. They ate dinner at the kitchen table that wobbled unless you put a folded napkin under the short leg. Caleb listened to Marcus talk about soccer, about how Tyler Morrison had scored 3 goals at practice, and how their coach said Marcus had good instincts for defense. Watched Sarah push pasta around her plate, not eating much, worrying in that way she did where she carried everything inside until it was about to break her. After dinner, after Marcus went to bed still chattering about soccer, Caleb found Sarah in her room, sitting at her desk with her homework untouched, staring at her phone. "You okay?" he asked from the doorway. "Are we going to lose the house?" No point lying to her. She was too smart for that. "I don't know yet. Maybe. Probably." Sarah nodded, jaw tight. She had her mother's eyes, but her father's stubbornness. "What are you going to do?" "Find work. There's other shops, You hate working for other people." "Doesn't matter what I hate. Matters what pays the bills." She turned to look at him, and the expression on her face made him feel like he was the child, and she was the parent. "Mom left because you wouldn't give up on the shop. You worked 80 hours a week trying to save it, and she said you cared more about dead metal than your family." The words hit like a fist. I'm not saying she was right." Sarah's voice cracked. "I'm saying you already sacrificed everything for that shop, and you still lost it. So maybe it's okay to let it go now." Caleb sat down on the edge of her bed, suddenly exhausted in a way that went deeper than muscle and bone. "Your grandfather built that place from nothing. He trusted me to keep it going." "Grandpa's dead, Dad, and he wouldn't want you killing yourself for bricks and mortar. It's not just—" He stopped. Didn't know how to explain that the shop was the last thing tying him to a version of himself that had felt competent, capable, like he was building something instead of just surviving. Sarah came over and sat next to him, leaned her head against his shoulder the way she used to when she was little, before she decided she was too grown up for that kind of thing. "We'll figure it out," she said quietly. "We always do." Caleb put his arm around her and didn't say that he had no idea how. 300 miles away, in a city where the buildings competed to touch the sky and won, Victoria Kane stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of her corner office and looked down at people who appeared the size of ants. She was 30 years old, 5'6" in bare feet, and controlled a business empire worth $4 billion. Forbes had called her a ruthless corporate strategist. Bloomberg had labeled her the Ice Queen of Tech. She'd been on the cover of Time magazine with the headline, "The Woman Who Wins Everything." What they didn't know, what no one knew, was that she was about to lose it all. "You can't be serious." Natalie Chen, her CFO and the closest thing Victoria had to a friend, stood near the desk with a tablet clutched in her hands. "A marriage contract? Victoria, this is insane. It's strategic." Victoria didn't turn from the window. Below, traffic moved in patterns that looked chaotic up close but made sense from a distance. Everything made sense from a distance. "It's desperate." "Same thing." Natalie set the tablet down with more force than necessary. "Your board of directors is already questioning your judgment after the Shanghai deal fell through. If you announce you're essentially buying a husband, then they'll question my judgment more vocally. But they can't vote me out if I restructure my assets through a marriage trust. That's the whole point. There has to be another way." Victoria finally turned, her reflection ghost-like in the window behind her. She was wearing what she always wore. Tailored suit in charcoal gray, minimal jewelry, hair pulled back so severely it gave her headaches. Armor disguised as fashion. "David Carmichael owns 23% of my company. He's convinced 3 other board members to side with him. That's 41%. If he gets Richard Costa to flip, which he will because Richard's an opportunistic coward, that's 48%. They need 51 for a vote of no confidence. So fight back. Expose Carmichael's, I've tried. He's covered his tracks too well." Victoria moved to her desk, a massive slab of reclaimed wood that cost more than most people's cars. "The marriage contract protects my controlling interest by placing it in a spousal trust that requires unanimous consent to dissolve. It's airtight. I had 3 different law firms review it. Impan. And what man is going to agree to this? You're asking someone to marry you for money, to sign a contract that gives him no real power, to participate in what is essentially corporate theater. I'm asking someone who needs money badly enough not to care about the rest. Natalie was quiet for a moment. You're going to exploit someone's desperation. Yes. That's cold, even for you. Victoria met her eyes. I built this company from nothing. My father thought I should marry some investment banker and host charity galas. My board thinks I'm too young, too female, too aggressive. Everyone I've ever met has underestimated me, and I've spent 15 years proving them all wrong. I'm not going to lose my company because I played fair while Carmichael played dirty. So you'll play dirtier. I'll play to win. That's what I've always done. Though. Natalie picked up her tablet. I'll draft a press release, soften the language, make it sound less like a transaction and more like, I don't know, modern romance. Don't bother. Honesty will generate more attention, and attention is what we need. I want every man in the country to know I'm offering life-changing money for 60 days of marriage. No love, no complications. Just a simple business arrangement. You're going to get thousands of applications from con artists and gold diggers. Then we'll sort through them. Find someone believable. Someone who looks like they need the money for legitimate reasons. Victoria pulled up a document on her computer. Victoria pulled up a Kashish scheme. I've already outlined the criteria. Age range, background check requirements, media training capability. Media training? Natalie laughed, but it sounded hollow. Victoria, you're talking about a human being, not hiring an actor. I'm hiring someone to play a role. That's exactly what this is. Natalie headed for the door, then stopped. What happens after 60 days? When the contract expires and you've restructured your assets? He gets paid. We divorce. I keep my company. And you don't think you'll feel anything? 60 days living with someone, pretending to be married. I won't have to pretend very hard. I'm not looking for connection, Natalie. I'm looking for protection. After Natalie left, Victoria stood at the window again. The sun was setting, painting the city in shades of amber and shadow. Somewhere down there, someone was struggling to pay rent, to feed their family, to keep their world from falling apart. Someone desperate enough to take her offer. She'd find them. She always did. Bang! The news broke on a Tuesday morning while Caleb was updating his resume at the kitchen table. Marcus was eating cereal and watching cartoons, and Sarah was getting ready for school. The local news had it as a human interest story. Billionaire CEO seeks husband in unprecedented marriage contract. Caleb barely paid attention until Sarah came into the kitchen, phone in hand, eyes wide. Dad? Dad? You have to see this. I'm busy, honey. No, seriously. She thrust the phone at him. This woman is offering $5 million for a 60-day marriage. It's all over social media. Caleb glanced at the screen, saw a photo of a woman in a business suit, expression cold and controlled, standing in what looked like a corporate boardroom. The headline read, Victoria Kane's shocking proposal, real marriage, real money, no romance. That's insane, he muttered, handing the phone back. She's looking for someone real, someone who needs the money for honest reasons. Sarah was reading from the article. It says here she wants to meet candidates in person, that she's looking for authenticity, not actors or models. Sarah, stop. $5 million, Dad. It's a publicity stunt. What if it's not? She sat down across from him, and the look on her face was so earnest it hurt. What if you applied? What if absolutely not? We're about to lose the house. You said yourself you don't know how we're going to pay rent anywhere else on what you'd make working for someone. I am not prostituting myself to some rich woman for money. The word hung in the air, harsh and ugly. Marcus looked up from his cereal, eyes confused. Sarah's expression hardened. It's a marriage contract, not prostitution. It's legal. It's temporary. And it would solve every single problem we have. It would solve nothing. You think money fixes what's broken in this family? I think money pays for electricity and food and keeps a roof over our heads. Caleb stood up, the chair scraping loud against the floor. We're not having this conversation. Because you're too proud? Because I have dignity.
Dignity doesn't feed us. Sarah's voice cracked. She was crying now, angry tears that she swiped away furiously. You always do this. You always choose pride over practical.
And we're the ones who suffer for it. Mom left because of it, the shop's gone because of it, and now we're going to end up homeless because you're too stubborn to even consider that's enough. It's not enough. It's never enough with you. She grabbed her backpack and stormed out, the front door slamming behind her. Marcus set down his spoon. Is Sarah right? Are we going to be homeless? Caleb closed his eyes. No, buddy. We're going to be fine. You keep saying that, but you look scared. I'm not scared. You look like it. Caleb sat back down, pulled his son close. I'm worried. That's different from scared. But worry is my job, not yours. Your job is school and soccer and being 9 years old. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then, if you married that lady, would we have to move? Benmint. I'm not marrying her. But if you did, it's not going to happen. But if... Marcus. Caleb kept his voice gentle. Sometimes grown-ups have to make hard choices. And those choices aren't always about money. They're about what kind of person you want to be, what kind of example you want to set. You understand? Besiti. Ma desatum. Marcus nodded, but Caleb could see he didn't. How could he? At 9 years old, morality was simple, right and wrong, black and white. He didn't understand the gray areas where desperation lived. After Marcus left for school, Caleb sat alone in the kitchen and pulled up the article on his laptop. Read it properly this time. Victoria Kane, 30 years old, CEO of Kane Technologies. Self-made billionaire. No criminal record, no scandals, no obvious red flags except for being nicknamed the Ice Queen and having a reputation for ruthless business tactics. The article included quotes from her press conference. I'm looking for someone real, someone who needs this opportunity for legitimate reasons. This is a legal, contractual arrangement with clear terms and fair compensation. I'm not interested in romance or companionship. I'm offering a business proposition to someone who needs it. $5 million. Caleb closed the laptop. It was insane, degrading. Caleb. Everything he'd taught his kids about dignity and self-respect would be a lie if he even considered. His phone rang. The bank. He stared at it for 3 rings before answering. Mr. Hayes, this is Jennifer Blackwell from First County Bank. I'm calling about your second mortgage payment. It's now 45 days past due, and we need to discuss your options. Options. Such a polite word for choices that all led to the same place. I'm working on it, Caleb said. I understand you're in a difficult position. However, we have procedures we have to follow. If we don't receive payment within the next 15 days, we'll have to begin foreclosure proceedings. 15 days. After he hung up, Caleb sat at the table for a long time. The house was quiet. The kitchen clock ticked. Outside, wind moved through the trees his grandfather had planted. He thought about Sarah's face when she'd asked if they were going to be homeless, about Marcus trying to understand why his father would choose pride over security, about the shop that was gone, the marriage that had failed, the slow erosion of everything he'd tried to build. Then he thought about a woman in a glass tower who was willing to pay $5 million for something she could have gotten for free if she'd wanted anything real. He opened his laptop again. The application was surprisingly simple. Basic information, background check authorization, a 500-word essay explaining why you were applying. Caleb stared at the blank text box for 20 minutes. What was he supposed to write? That he was broke and desperate? That he'd failed at everything that mattered? That he was considering this because his daughter was right and his pride was worth less than his children's stability? He started typing. My name is Caleb Hayes. I'm 32 years old, father of 2, recently lost my business to bankruptcy. I'm applying because I have 15 days before the bank forecloses on my house, because my kids deserve better than watching their father fail, and because I'm out of options that don't involve swallowing my pride and admitting that sometimes money does solve problems. I don't expect you to care about my story. You're offering a business arrangement, and I'm in a position to accept it. I can sign a contract, follow through on my commitments, and walk away when it's done. I'm not looking for romance or drama. I'm looking for a way to keep my family safe. If that's what you need, then we can help each other. Domed. He read it over 3 times, deleted it twice, rewrote it from scratch, then finally hit submit before he could change his mind again. The confirmation page said he'd receive a response within 72 hours if selected for an interview. Caleb closed the laptop and put his head in his hands. Sarah came home that afternoon and found him at the kitchen table, hadn't moved in hours. "Dad?" He looked up. "I applied." Her eyes widened. "Yeah." She dropped her backpack and came over, put her hand on his shoulder. "I'm sorry for what I said this morning about pride and Mom, and you were right. I was mean. You were honest." He covered her hand with his. "I've been lying to myself about a lot of things. About what I can fix on my own. About what matters more than what. Maybe it's time I stopped." Sarah sat down next to him. "What if she picks you? She won't. There's probably thousands of applications. Hey, but what if she does?" Caleb thought about it. About leaving this house, these kids, for 60 days. About living some kind of pretend life with a stranger who saw him as a transaction. About coming back with enough money to start over, to give Sarah and Marcus the stability they deserved. Then I guess we'll find out what $5 million of dignity costs. Victoria reviewed applications in her office late into the night. Natalie had set up a filtering system, background checks first, then financial verification to confirm the applicant actually needed the money, then a preliminary review of the personal essays. Out of 43,000 applications in the first 24 hours, the system had flagged 217 as potentially viable candidates. Victoria was reading through them herself, looking for something she couldn't quite articulate. Authenticity, maybe. Desperation wrapped in honesty. Most were what she expected. Sob stories that felt rehearsed, financial troubles that were self-inflicted, essays that read like they'd been workshopped by committee. She rejected them quickly, efficiently, the same way she evaluated quarterly reports. Then she got to number 86. "My name is Caleb Hayes. I'm 32 years old, father of 2, recently lost my business to bankruptcy." Victoria read it twice. No embellishment, no attempt to manipulate her emotions, just bare facts laid out like items on a balance sheet. She pulled up his background check. Caleb Michael Hayes. Born in a town called Riverside, population 4,000. Married at 22, divorced at 30. 2 children, full custody. No criminal record. Credit score in the low 500s. Bad, but not catastrophic. The bankruptcy was recent, business-related, seemed legitimate. She looked at his photo. Driver's license picture, so not flattering, but it showed a man with tired eyes and a face that hadn't been touched by anything resembling luxury. Work-worn hands visible even in the photo, the kind of person who'd never set foot in a building like hers. Perfect. She flagged his application for an in-person interview. Time. The call came 3 days later while Caleb was changing the oil on his truck in the driveway. Sarah ran out, phone in hand. "Dad! Dad! Someone from Kane Technologies is calling." Caleb's hands were covered in motor oil. He wiped them on a rag that made them dirtier and took the phone. "Hello? Mr. Hayes." Professional female voice, efficient. "This is Natalie Chen, CFO of Kane Technologies. Ms. Kane would like to meet with you regarding your application. Are you available to travel to the city this Friday?" Caleb's heart was pounding. Yes. Yes, I can do that." "Excellent. I'm emailing you details now. Travel and accommodation will be covered by us. The interview will take place at our main office. Do you have any questions?" "About 1,000? "No, thank you." That's it. "We'll see you Friday, Mr. Hayes." After she hung up, Caleb stood in the driveway holding the phone, Sarah staring at him with wide eyes. "She wants to meet you," Sarah whispered. "Yeah." Oh my God, Dad, this is..." She stopped, seemed to realize what this actually meant. That her father was going to interview to be some rich woman's temporary husband. That their life was about to change in ways none of them could predict. "I don't have to go," Caleb said. "I can call back, tell them to..." "No." Sarah's voice was firm. "You go, you meet her, and then we decide." That night, Caleb lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. The house made familiar sounds around him, the furnace kicking on, the old wood settling, the wind against the windows. Sounds that had been part of his life for 32 years. In 2 days, he'd walk into a world so foreign it might as well be another planet. He'd sit across from a billionaire and negotiate selling 60 days of his life. And the worst part, the part that made his stomach turn, was that he was going to say yes. Had already decided if he was honest with himself. Because Sarah was right. Because Marcus deserved better. Because sometimes dignity was a luxury you couldn't afford. He thought about his father, wondered what the old man would say. Probably something about keeping your integrity, about how money earned dishonestly was worth less than poverty earned clean. But his father had never been 45 days from foreclosure with 2 kids depending on him. Caleb turned over, pulled the blanket up, and tried not to think about Friday. Tried not to imagine what kind of woman looked at human beings and saw business opportunities. Tried not to wonder what he was walking into, and whether $5 million was enough to make him forget what it cost. Sleep didn't come until after 3 in the morning, and when it did, it was restless and full of dreams he couldn't remember when he woke. Friday was coming, and with it, the end of everything he thought he knew about who he was. The train ride took 4 hours through countryside that gradually gave way to industrial zones, then suburbs, then the city itself rising like something out of a different century. Caleb sat by the window with his duffel bag at his feet and watched America transform from fields to concrete. He'd borrowed a suit from Mike Patterson, who owned the hardware store in Riverside and was roughly the same size. The jacket was a little tight in the shoulders, the pants a little short, but it was better than showing up in jeans and work boots. Sarah had made him practice what to say. Marcus had made him promise to bring back a picture of the tallest building. Neither of them had mentioned what would happen if this actually worked. The hotel they'd booked him into had a lobby with marble floors and a chandelier that probably cost more than his truck. Caleb checked in with a credit card that had maybe $300 of available credit left, felt like an imposter the entire time. The receptionist smiled at him with professional politeness that didn't reach her eyes. She could tell he didn't belong here. His room was on the 14th floor. He'd never been higher than 3 stories in his life. The window looked out over the city, buildings stacked against buildings, light starting to come on as evening settled in. Somewhere down there, Victoria Kane was in her glass tower, reviewing his file, deciding if he was worth her time. Caleb took a shower in a bathroom that had heated floors and water pressure that felt like a massage. Put on the borrowed suit, tied the tie 3 times before it looked right. Stared at himself in the mirror and saw a man playing dress-up. His phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. Car will pick you up at 7 p.m. Interview at 7:30. NC. Natalie Chen, the CFO who'd called him. He'd looked her up online. Stanford MBA, worked at Goldman Sachs before joining Kane Technologies, known for being almost as ruthless as her boss. The articles about Victoria Kane painted a picture of a woman who ate competitors for breakfast and didn't believe in second chances. Caleb sat on the edge of the bed and tried to remember why he was doing this. Right. His kids. The house. 15 days until foreclosure, now down to 11. The car arrived exactly at 7. Black sedan, driver in a suit, the kind of service Caleb had only seen in movies. The driver didn't make small talk, which was fine. Caleb watched the city slide past the windows and tried to breathe normally. Kane Technologies occupied floors 30 through 45 of a building that looked like it was trying to cut the sky in half. All glass and steel, aggressive architecture that made a statement about power. Caleb followed the driver through a lobby where his footsteps echoed on polished stone, into an elevator with mirrors on all sides that reflected his inadequacy from every angle. The elevator didn't have buttons. The driver scanned a card and they started rising, smooth and fast enough that Caleb's ears popped. Floor numbers ticked past on a display. 20, 25, 30, 35. The city shrank below them until it looked like a circuit board, all lights and patterns. They stopped at 45. Top floor. The doors opened onto a reception area that was all clean lines and expensive art. A woman sat behind a curved desk, young and polished, wearing the kind of clothes that cost more than Caleb's mortgage payment. "Mr. Hayes," she said, standing. "Miss Kane is ready for you. Follow me, please." They walked down a hallway with floor-to-ceiling windows on one side. The city sprawled out like something you could own if you had enough money. The woman stopped at a door, knocked once, opened it. "Mr. Hayes," she announced, then stepped aside. Caleb walked into an office that was bigger than his living room and kitchen combined. More windows. A desk that looked like a sculpture. And behind it, standing with her back to him, looking out at the city like she owned it. "Mr. Hayes." Victoria Kane turned, and Caleb's first thought was that the photos hadn't prepared him for how precise she was. Everything about her was controlled, the way she stood, the way she looked at him, the way she gestured to a chair. "Please, sit." He sat. The chair was leather and probably cost more than his truck. Victoria didn't sit. She stayed standing, studying him with the same expression he imagined she used to evaluate quarterly reports. "You came. Basmakis Tokoki Amasin. You paid for the ticket." A lot of people would have taken the free hotel room and skipped the interview. "I'm not a lot of people." "No." She moved to her desk, finally sat down. "You're a 32-year-old mechanic with 2 children, a failed marriage, and a business that went bankrupt 6 weeks ago. You owe $78,000 to various creditors. You're 45 days behind on your second mortgage, and according to your bank statements, you have $417 in available assets." Caleb's jaw tightened. "You were thorough." "I'm always thorough. That's how I built a $4 billion company before I turned 30. Congratulations." "You don't sound impressed." "I'm not here to be impressed. I'm here because you offered $5 million for something I can provide." Victoria leaned back in her chair, something that might have been amusement flickering across her face. "And what do you think you're providing, Mr. Hayes?" "A husband, temporary, legal, whatever you need for your corporate strategy sheet." "You read the coverage." "Enough of it. And you don't find this degrading, selling yourself for money?" Caleb met her eyes. "You're buying a service. I'm providing it. People trade time for money every day. This is just more honest about it. Most people don't trade marriage. Most people aren't desperate enough." "Yes." The words hung in the air between them. Victoria studied him for a long moment, and Caleb had the unsettling feeling that she could see right through him, past the borrowed suit, past the rehearsed confidence, straight down to the fear he was trying to hide. "Tell me about your children," she said. "Why?" "Because they're part of this equation, whether you want them to be or not. 60 days is a long time. They'll have questions." Caleb thought about Sarah's face when he'd left that morning, the way she'd hugged him tight and whispered good luck. About Marcus asking if he'd really meet a billionaire. Sarah's 13. Too smart for her own good. Protective of her brother, cynical about marriage because her mother walked out. Marcus is 9, plays soccer, still believes in happy endings. "And you? What do you believe in?" "I believe in doing what needs to be done." "That's not an answer." It's the only one I have right now." Victoria stood again, moved to the window. The city lights were fully on now, the skyline glittering like something out of a fantasy. "I'm going to be direct with you, Mr. Hayes. I don't need a partner. I don't need companionship. I need a legal husband who can sign documents, attend public events, and present a believable marriage for 60 days. At the end of that period, we divorce, you receive $5 million, and we never see each other again." Sounds simple. It won't be. She turned to face him. "The media will dissect every moment. My competitors will look for any sign of fraud. You'll have to live in my apartment, attend social functions, convince people who make their living reading body language that we're legitimate. I can do that. Can you? You're a mechanic from a town of 4,000 people. My world operates on rules you don't know and social dynamics you've never encountered. Then teach me. It's not that simple. Nothing about this is simple." Caleb stood, suddenly tired of being looked down at. "You want honest? I need this money. My kids are 11 days from losing their home. I failed at everything I tried to build, and this is the only option I have left that doesn't involve dragging my family into worse poverty. So yes, I'll learn your rules. I'll smile for cameras. I'll sign whatever papers you need. Because $5 million is enough to give my children a future, and I've already sacrificed everything else trying to provide one." Victoria was quiet for a moment, then, "Your application said you weren't looking for romance or drama." "I'm not?" "Good, because I don't have room for either." She moved back to her desk, pulled out a folder. "This is the contract. 60 pages, written by the best lawyers money can buy. You'll need to have your own attorney review it." "I don't have an attorney, Then I'll provide one. Independent, paid by me, but working for you. I want this airtight, which means you need to understand exactly what you're signing. Caleb took the folder. The weight of it felt significant. When would this start? If you agree to terms, immediately. This weekend. My board meets Monday morning, and I need the marriage certificate filed before then. This weekend? I told you it wouldn't be simple. So, Caleb opened the folder, scanned the first page. Legal language that might as well have been another language. What about my kids? They stay in Riverside. You'll have supervised video calls daily, in-person visits every other weekend. That's non-negotiable. I can't have children in my apartment disrupting the performance. Something cold settled in Caleb's chest. Performance. Yes, that's what this is, a performance of marriage for legal and strategic purposes. Right. He closed the folder. I need to think about it. You have until tomorrow morning. The attorney will meet you at your hotel at 9 a.m. If you sign, we proceed. If you don't, you go home. And I select another candidate. There are other candidates? 27 that made it to final review. You're the most convincing, but not the only option. Caleb nodded slowly. Anything else? Yes. Victoria's expression shifted, became harder. If you do this, you follow my rules completely. No surprises, no improvisations, no emotional complications. I've built my entire life on control, Mr. Hayes. I don't tolerate variables I can't predict. Understood. I don't think you do, but you will. The driver took him back to the hotel in silence. Caleb sat in the back seat with the contract folder on his lap and watched the city slide past. All those lives stacked on top of each other in buildings that reached for something beyond reach. In his hotel room, he called Sarah. She answered on the first ring. Dad? How did it go? It went. He sat on the edge of the bed, suddenly exhausted. She offered me the contract. And I have until tomorrow morning to decide. Sarah was quiet for a moment. What's she like? Caleb thought about Victoria Kane standing at her window, looking out at a city she'd conquered, talking about marriage like it was a quarterly earnings report. Cold, precise. Everything you'd expect from someone who built a billion-dollar company before 30. Do you like her? This isn't about liking her. I know, but... Sarah. Caleb's voice was gentle. This is a business arrangement. She was very clear about that. No emotions, no complications. Just 60 days of pretending to be married so she can protect her assets. That's so weird. Yeah. But you're going to do it. Not a question. I don't know yet. Dad, come on. We both know you're going to say yes. You didn't come all this way to say no. She was right, and they both knew it. Caleb looked at the contract folder sitting on the desk. If I do this, you and Marcus stay with Mrs. Patterson. Daily video calls, visits every other weekend. I'd be gone for 2 months. We'll be fine. Sarah. Dad, we'll be fine. Mrs. Patterson already said we could stay there if we needed to. Marcus loves their dog, and 2 months is nothing if it means we don't lose the house. Caleb closed his eyes. 13 years old and already so pragmatic. When did you grow up? Around the time Mom left and I had to learn how to make dinner. I'm sorry. Don't be. Just take the deal. Sign the contract. Do what you have to do so we can stop worrying about money for 5 minutes. After he hung up, Caleb ordered room service, a burger that cost $32 and tasted like cardboard, and sat at the desk reading the contract. Most of it was exactly what Victoria had said. Terms of marriage, division of assets, public appearance requirements, grounds for termination, confidentiality clauses. But there were sections that made his stomach turn. Section 7.3, Physical Contact. The parties agree to engage in appropriate physical contact, hand-holding, brief embraces, etc., as necessary to maintain public perception of legitimate marriage. All such contact will be initiated with verbal consent and limited to public settings. Section 9.2, Cohabitation. Party B, Caleb Hayes, will reside in Party A's, Victoria Kane, primary residence for the duration of the contract period. Separate bedrooms will be maintained. Party B agrees to respect Party A's privacy and personal space. Section 11.1, Termination. Either party may terminate this agreement early under the following conditions. A. Material breach of contract terms. B. Public revelation of the arrangement's true nature. E. Mutual consent. Early termination will result in prorated payment based on days completed. It was all there in black and white. A marriage reduced to clauses and subsections, romance translated into legal obligations. Caleb had never felt more like a commodity. He slept poorly, woke up at 6, and couldn't fall back asleep. The attorney arrived at 9 a.m. exactly. A woman in her 50s named Patricia Morales, who had kind eyes and the kind of directness Caleb appreciated. "I've reviewed the contract," she said, settling into the chair across from him in the hotel's business center. "It's extraordinarily favorable to you, which makes me suspicious." "How so?" $5 million for 60 days of work is roughly $83,000 per day. No one pays that kind of money without expecting something in return. She's getting legal protection for her assets. She could achieve that through a dozen other methods that would cost a fraction of this amount. So the question is, why this? Why you? Caleb shook his head. "I don't know." "Then let me speculate. Victoria Kane is known for being strategic to the point of ruthlessness. She doesn't make moves that don't serve multiple purposes. This marriage protects her assets, yes. But it also generates massive publicity, puts her competitors off balance, and makes her appear unpredictable, which in her industry is an advantage. So I'm a chess piece. We're all chess pieces to people like her, Mr. Hayes. The question is whether you're comfortable with that role for 2 months in exchange for life-changing money." Caleb looked out the window at the city waking up. Somewhere out there, his kids were eating breakfast at Mrs. Patterson's house, getting ready for school, trusting him to make the right choice. "What would you do?" Patricia smiled slightly. "I'd read Section 14 very carefully." He flipped to Section 14, Media and Public Relations. "Note subsection 14.6, Patricia said. Any damage to your reputation resulting from this arrangement will be remediated at Ms. Kane's expense, including legal representation, public relations consultation, and financial compensation for lost opportunities. She's essentially agreeing to protect you from any fallout." "Why would she do that?" "Because she needs you to be credible, and credibility can't survive character assassination. This clause is actually in your favor. It means she has incentive to keep you safe." Caleb read through the section again. Patricia was right. For all its cold legal language, the contract was designed to protect him almost as much as it protected Victoria. "There's one more thing," Patricia said. Section 20, subsection 4. The morality clause. Caleb found it. Party B agrees to conduct himself in a manner befitting a spouse of Party A, including but not limited to maintaining personal integrity, avoiding illegal activities, abstaining from relationships with third parties, and protecting the confidential nature of this arrangement. Standard language, Patricia continued, but pay attention to the reciprocal clause in 20.5. She's held to the same standards. This isn't one-sided servitude, Mr. Hayes. It's a mutual agreement with mutual obligations. So what's your recommendation? Patricia closed her own copy of the contract. My recommendation is that you think very carefully about whether you can live with yourself after this. Not financially, obviously the money solves your immediate problems. But personally, can you spend 60 days married to someone who sees you as a business asset and still recognize yourself in the mirror? It was the question Caleb had been avoiding since he first filled out the application. "I don't know," he admitted. "Then maybe you shouldn't sign." But he did. 3 hours later, after Patricia had negotiated 2 small changes to the visitation schedule with his children and added a clause protecting his custody rights in case of disputes, Caleb signed on page 60, initialed every section, and watched Patricia witness it with a signature that looked like it had ended 1,000 contracts before this one. "It's done," she said quietly. "You're legally committed." Mas sakike saturi. Caleb stared at his signature still drying on the page. Caleb Michael Hayes, selling 60 days of his life to a woman he'd met once. His father would have been ashamed. His ex-wife would have said it proved she was right about him. His kids would have to live with the consequences of having a father who'd done this. But they'd also have a house, and food, and a future that didn't include watching the bank take everything. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now Ms. Kane's team takes over. You'll be married tomorrow morning in a private ceremony, press announcement goes out tomorrow afternoon, and you move into her apartment tomorrow evening. They'll handle everything, media training, wardrobe, scheduling. Your job is to show up and follow instructions. That simple? Nothing about this is simple, Mr. Hayes, but yes, that's the process. Patricia left him with a copy of the signed contract and a handshake that felt like condolence. Caleb sat alone in the business center holding 60 pages of his future, trying to figure out if he'd just saved his life or sold it. His phone buzzed. Text from Victoria. Signed? He typed back, yes. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, car picks you up at 8 a.m. tomorrow. Bring nothing you can't carry. Everything else will be provided. Caleb looked around the hotel room that had been his sanctuary for one night. Tomorrow, he'd be living in a billionaire's apartment, pretending to be her husband, performing a marriage that had nothing to do with love and everything to do with corporate strategy. He called Sarah. I signed it, he said when she answered. Oh my God, Dad, really? Really? She was quiet for a moment, then, are you okay? I will be. That's not what I asked. Caleb closed his eyes. No, I'm not okay, but I will be. Eventually. When do you start? Tomorrow. We get married tomorrow morning. Married? Sarah's voice was strange. That's so weird. You're getting married to someone you don't even know. It's not a real marriage? It's legal, though, right? The contract said it's a legal marriage. Legally real, emotionally fake. That's super weird, Dad. I know. Marcus's voice came on, distant and excited. Dad! Sarah says you're getting married. Does that mean we have a new mom? Caleb's chest tightened. No, buddy. It's complicated. It's for work. Like a job. You're getting married for a job? Kind of. That doesn't make sense. I know it doesn't, but I need you to trust me, okay? This is going to help us. It's going to mean we don't have to move, and you can keep playing soccer, and Sarah can stay at her school. Because of the money? Yeah, because of the money. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then, is she nice? The lady you're marrying? Caleb thought about Victoria standing at her window, talking about control and performance and variables she couldn't predict. She's different from anyone I've ever met. But is she nice? I don't know yet, Mark. I'll find out. After he hung up, Caleb packed his duffel bag, which took about 3 minutes since he'd barely unpacked, and sat on the bed watching the city lights come on. Tomorrow, his life would change in ways he couldn't predict. Tomorrow, he'd stand next to a woman he didn't know, and promise things he didn't mean in front of witnesses who were paid to be there. Tomorrow, he'd become something he never thought he'd be, a husband for hire. His phone buzzed again. Text from an unknown number. This is Natalie Chen. Tomorrow, black suit, white shirt, simple tie. Car at 8 a.m. Ceremony at 9. Press conference at 11. You'll move into Victoria's apartment at 2 p.m. Questions? Caleb typed back. No questions. Actually, he had about 1,000 questions, but none that Natalie Chen could answer. He lay awake most of the night, watching the shadows move across the ceiling, trying to imagine what tomorrow would feel like. The ceremony would be quick. Patricia had mentioned that. Just vows. Signatures, done. No family, no friends, no pretense that this was anything except what it was. At 7 a.m., Caleb gave up on sleep and took a shower. Put on the suit Mike had loaned him. Wouldn't need it after today, apparently, since Victoria's team was providing everything. Stood in front of the mirror and practiced looking like someone who knew what he was doing. The car arrived at 8 exactly. Same driver, same silence. They drove through morning traffic to a building Caleb didn't recognize. Underground parking, elevator to the 15th floor. A private office, expensive and sterile, where a man in robes waited with paperwork spread across a desk. Mr. Hayes, the man said, standing, I'm Judge Morrison. I'll be officiating today. Where's Victoria? Ms. Kane will arrive shortly. Please, have a seat. Look. Caleb sat. The office had windows overlooking the city, morning light cutting through glass towers. He wondered if Victoria picked this place, or if someone on her team had arranged it. Wondered if she was nervous, if she had doubts, if she'd slept at all last night. The door opened. Victoria walked in wearing a suit that probably cost more than Caleb's truck, hair pulled back, expression neutral. She nodded to the judge, glanced at Caleb. "You're here," she said. "Where else would I be? Some people run." "I don't run." "Good." She moved to stand beside him, close enough that he could smell her perfume, something expensive and cold. "Let's get this over with." Judge Morrison cleared his throat. "We'll need 2 witnesses. I've arranged—" The door opened again. Natalie Chen walked in with another woman Caleb didn't recognize. Both looked uncomfortable, like they were attending something vaguely inappropriate. "Witnesses," Natalie said shortly. "Let's proceed." Geets. Judge Morrison opened a leather folder. "This will be brief. We're here to solemnize the marriage between Victoria Ann Kane and Caleb Michael Hayes. This is a legal and binding ceremony. Do you both understand?" "Yes," Victoria said. "Yes," Caleb echoed. "Do you, Victoria Ann Kane, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" "I do." No hesitation, no emotion. Just 2 words delivered like items on a checklist. "Do you, Caleb Michael Hayes, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" Caleb looked at Victoria. She was staring straight ahead, jaw tight, everything about her radiating control. This was what he'd signed up for. This was the deal. "I do. By the power vested in me by the state, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may sign the certificate." That was it. 30 seconds, and his life had changed. Caleb signed the marriage certificate with a pen that probably cost more than his weekly groceries, watched Victoria sign below him, then Natalie and the other woman as witnesses. "Congratulations," Judge Morrison said, but his tone suggested condolences. Victoria turned to Caleb. "We have a press conference in 90 minutes. My team will brief you in the car." "No kiss?" Caleb said before he could stop himself. Victoria's expression didn't change. "That's not in the contract." "Right. Of course." They rode down in the elevator together, alone except for their reflections in the mirrored walls. Husband and wife, legally bound, complete strangers. "You did well," Victoria said as they reached the ground floor. "I said 2 words. You showed up. That's more than most people manage." The car took them to Kane Technologies. Victoria's assistant, the polished woman from yesterday, met them in the lobby with garment bags and a makeup artist who made Caleb sit still, while she did something to his face that felt humiliating. "Just evening out your skin tone," the woman said cheerfully. "Cameras wash people out." Oh. Natalie appeared with the tablet. "Okay, quick brief. Press conference in 40 minutes. Victoria will make a statement. You'll stand next to her and smile. You don't speak unless directly asked a question. And if you are, keep it short and positive. Don't mention the contract terms. Don't speculate about the future. Don't give them anything they can twist. What if they ask why we got married? Let Victoria handle it. She's been dealing with hostile press since she was 23. Caleb changed into a new suit, custom fit, perfectly tailored, probably cost more than his mortgage payment. Looked at himself in the mirror and saw someone playing a role in a movie he hadn't auditioned for. The press conference was held in a building across the street, massive room with rows of chairs and cameras set up like an execution. Caleb stood backstage with Victoria while reporters filed in, their voices creating a low buzz of anticipation. "Remember," Victoria said quietly, "you're my husband. You support me. You believe in this. Nothing else matters." Easy for you to say. She looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time since the ceremony. "Do you think this is easy for me?" "Seems like it." "Then you're not paying attention." She turned away. 2 minutes. Don't embarrass me. Osan. They walked out together. The camera flashes were blinding, immediate, disorienting. Caleb stood next to Victoria at the podium and tried to smile like this was normal. Victoria's voice was clear and controlled. "Thank you all for coming. This morning I married Caleb Hayes in a private ceremony. I know there's been speculation about my announcement last week, and I want to be clear. This is a real marriage, legal and binding, between 2 people who've chosen to build a partnership." The questions came fast. "Ms. Kane, why the unconventional approach?" "Because conventional approaches have never interested me." "Mr. Hayes, what do you do for a living?" Caleb leaned toward the microphone. "I'm a mechanic. Was, anyway. Now I guess I'm this."
Scattered laughter. Victoria's hand found his, squeezed once, warning or reassurance. He couldn't tell. "Are you in love?" Someone shouted from the back. Victoria's smile was ice. "I don't think that's anyone's business but ours." "Is this a publicity stunt?" "It's a marriage. Make of it what you will." The questions continued for 20 minutes. Victoria fielded most of them, occasionally steering one to Caleb, who tried to sound believable when he talked about being attracted to Victoria's strength and intelligence. Tried not to feel like a trained seal performing for fish. Afterward, backstage, Victoria's facade cracked just slightly. She leaned against the wall, eyes closed, breathing carefully. "You okay?" Caleb asked. "Fine, just needed a moment." That was brutal. That was gentle. Wait until they really start digging. She opened her eyes. "You did better than I expected." Thanks, I think." It was a compliment. "You're a natural liar." "I'm not lying. I'm performing." "Same thing." She pushed off the wall. "Car's waiting. Let's go home." Home. The word felt wrong in her mouth. Victoria's apartment occupied the entire top floor of a building in the financial district. Caleb walked in and tried not to gape. Floor-to-ceiling windows, minimalist furniture that looked like art, a kitchen he could have fit his entire house into. Everything white and gray and cold. "Your room is this way," Victoria said, leading him down a hallway. She opened a door to a bedroom that was bigger than his and Sarah's rooms combined. "Bathroom's through there." "Closet's already stocked with your clothes. My team pulled your measurements from the suit fitting." Caleb set his duffel bag down. "This is insane. This is my life." "How do you live like this?" "It's so empty." Victoria's expression hardened. "It's clean, organized. Everything has its place." "It doesn't look lived in." "That's because I don't live, Mr. Hayes. I work." She moved to leave, then stopped. "We'll have dinner together tonight, 7 p.m. It's not optional. We need to establish routines that look legitimate." "Yes, ma'am." "Don't call me that. It makes you sound like an employee." "What should I call you?" "Victoria. We're married. Use my name." After she left, Caleb sat on the bed, which was obscenely comfortable, and looked around the room that would be his home for 60 days. Everything was perfect. Everything was cold. It felt like living in a museum. He called Sarah from his new phone. Victoria's team had given him one, already programmed with the numbers he'd need, and told her about the press conference, the apartment, the surreal feeling of being married to someone who treated him like a business acquisition. "Is it weird?" Sarah asked. "Incredibly weird. But you're okay." "I'm fine. How are you and Marcus?" "Good. Mrs. Patterson made us pot roast. Marcus cried a little at bedtime because he missed you." Guilt twisted in Caleb's chest. "Tell him I'll call tomorrow. Video chat. I want to see his face." "Okay, Dad?" "Yeah?" "I'm proud of you. I know this is hard." "Thanks, sweetheart." After he hung up, Caleb unpacked his duffel bag, which looked pathetic in the massive closet, next to all the expensive clothes Victoria's team had bought him. Took another shower in a bathroom with more water pressure than he knew existed. Put on jeans and a t-shirt because he refused to wear a suit in his own bedroom. At 7 p.m. exactly, he found Victoria in the dining room, sitting at a table that could seat 12. She'd changed into casual clothes, expensive casual, but still less armor-like than the suit. "Sit," she said. Caleb sat. A woman appeared from the kitchen, housekeeper maybe, or private chef, and set plates in front of them. Some kind of fish with vegetables that looked like they'd been arranged by an artist. They ate in silence for a few minutes. Then Victoria said, "You'll need to learn the basics of my business, enough to answer questions without sounding ignorant." "I thought I wasn't supposed to talk." "You're not supposed to volunteer information, but you'll be asked questions, especially at the fundraiser next week." "What fundraiser?" "Children's Hospital benefit, $5,000 a plate. We're expected to attend as a couple." Caleb set down his fork. "I don't belong at that kind of event." "You belong wherever I say you belong. You're my husband now. On paper. Legally. Which is all that matters." Victoria took a sip of wine. "Tell me about your children." "Why?" "Because I'll be asked about them. I need to sound informed." "Itaewon." So Caleb told her. About Sarah's sharp mind and protective instincts, about Marcus's innocent optimism and love of soccer,
about how they'd handled their mother leaving with more grace than he had. Victoria listened without interrupting, her expression unreadable. "They sound resilient," she said when he finished. "They've had to be." "And you? Are you resilient?" "I'm here, aren't I? Physically. Emotionally is a different question." Caleb met her eyes across the table. "What do you care about my emotions? This is a business arrangement. True, but I need you functional. If you fall apart, the whole thing falls apart."
I'm not going to fall apart. People say that right up until they do. Victoria stood. "I have work to finish. You're free to do whatever you want. Just stay in the apartment."
"We'll do media training tomorrow." She left him sitting at the table with half-eaten expensive fish and the echoing silence of a home that had never learned how to be warm. Caleb cleaned his plate, couldn't help himself, had been raised not to waste food, and wandered the apartment. Found a library with books that looked unread, a gym with equipment that looked unused, a living room with furniture arranged like a magazine spread. Everything perfect, everything empty. He ended up at the windows, looking out at the city exactly like Victoria had in her office. All those lights, all those lives, stacked and compressed and fighting for space. Somewhere down there, people were struggling the way he'd been struggling. And up here, in a glass tower, he was living in luxury while feeling more trapped than he'd ever felt in his small house with its crooked porch and leaky roof. His first day as a husband, and he'd never felt more alone. The media training started at 8 a.m. sharp, which meant Caleb was still foggy from a night spent in a bed too comfortable to feel real. A woman named Diane showed up at the apartment with a leather portfolio and the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. She worked in crisis management, she explained, and her job was to make sure Caleb didn't accidentally destroy Victoria's reputation through sheer incompetence. "Let's start with the basics," Diane said, settling onto the couch while Caleb sat across from her feeling like he was back in high school. "When someone asks about your relationship with Victoria, what do you say? That we're married? Be specific. Give them something real but controlled." "I don't know what that means." Diane sighed like she'd heard this before. "Okay, role play. I'm a reporter. Mr. Hayes, how did you and Victoria meet?" Caleb opened his mouth, closed it. They hadn't actually discussed this part. "We met through mutual circumstances?" "That sounds like you're hiding something, which you are, but they can't know that." Diane leaned forward. "The story is this. You met at a charity event 6 months ago. She was impressed by your honesty. You were attracted to her intelligence. You kept in touch, fell for each other, decided life was too short to wait. That's a lie. That's media relations. Learn the difference." They spent 3 hours rehearsing answers to questions Caleb had never imagined he'd have to answer. What's her favorite food? How does she take her coffee? What side of the bed does she sleep on? Details that actual married couples would know, that Caleb had to memorize like studying for a test he never wanted to take. Victoria appeared around 11, already dressed for the day in another suit that probably cost more than Caleb's monthly mortgage payment used to be. She listened to Diane drill him for a few minutes, then interrupted. "He sounds rehearsed." "He is rehearsed," Diane said. "That's the point." "No, the point is believability. He sounds like he's reading from a script." Victoria moved to stand in front of Caleb. "Stop trying to sound impressive. Just answer like a normal person would." "I am answering like a normal person." "You're answering like you think I want you to answer. That's different." She turned to Diane. "Give us a minute." After Diane left, Victoria sat down where she'd been. "Okay, real question. What's my coffee order?" "I don't know. I've never seen you drink coffee." "Black, 2 sugars. I drink it at 6 a.m. before you wake up." How am I supposed to know that? Ishe? You're not. But when someone asks, you say black with 2 sugars, and you say it like you've watched me make it 100 times. The confidence matters more than the accuracy. Caleb rubbed his face. "This is exhausting. Welcome to my life." Victoria stood. "I have meetings until 4. Natalie's sending over files on my business. Read them. Tonight we're having dinner with my mother." "Your what?" "My mother. She insists on meeting you. It'll be painful for both of us, so just smile and agree with whatever she says. Does she know this is fake?" "She knows it's strategic. She doesn't care as long as it protects the family assets." Victoria headed for the door, then paused. And Caleb? Don't try to charm her. She'll see right through it.
And she doesn't like being patronized.
The files Natalie sent over were dense and technical, full of terms like market capitalization and hostile acquisition and fiduciary duty. Caleb read them anyway, tried to absorb information about an industry he'd never thought about beyond using his phone and computer. Kane Technologies dealt in something called enterprise software solutions, which apparently meant selling expensive programs to other companies. Victoria had built the company from a startup she'd founded at 23 with money borrowed from investors who'd expected her to fail. She'd proved them wrong by being smarter and more ruthless than anyone anticipated. The profile painted a picture of a woman who won because she refused to accept losing as an option, who'd been underestimated her entire life and used it as fuel, who'd built an empire by burning every bridge that didn't lead forward. Caleb was still reading when his phone rang. Sarah, video call. Hey, sweetheart, he said, propping the phone against a bookend. Sarah's face appeared, Marcus crowding into frame behind her. Dad, we saw you on the news. Yeah? You looked uncomfortable. I was uncomfortable. But you did good, Marcus added. You didn't say anything stupid. Thanks, buddy. That's a low bar, but I'll take it. They talked for 20 minutes about school and soccer practice and how Mrs. Patterson's dog had eaten Marcus's homework, which sounded like a lie, but apparently wasn't. Caleb watched his kids' faces on the screen and felt the distance between them like a physical weight. 2 weeks in, and he already missed them with an ache that didn't fade. When can we visit? Sarah asked. 2 more weeks. The contract says every other weekend. That's forever. I know, but we'll video call every day. And guys, the money came through. First installment. The bank's been paid. House is safe. Sarah's eyes widened. Really? Really? You don't have to worry anymore. Marcus whooped. Sarah looked like she might cry. Dad, that's huge. Yeah, it is. After they hung up, Caleb sat in the silent apartment and let himself feel something close to relief. The house was safe. His kids had stability. Whatever degradation he was enduring here, it was buying them something real. Victoria's mother arrived at 7 p.m. in a town car, and an aura of judgment that preceded her through the door. Margaret Kane was 63, silver-haired, and dressed like she was attending a state dinner. She looked at Caleb the way someone might examine a used car they were considering not buying. So you're the mechanic, she said. Yes, ma'am. Don't ma'am me. I'm not that old. She swept past him into the dining room where Victoria was waiting. Victoria, darling, you look tired. Oh, hello, Mother. And thin. Are you eating? I'm fine. Margaret settled into a chair like it was a throne. Well, let's get this over with. Mr. Hayes, sit. Tell me about yourself. Dinner was 3 courses of tension served on china that probably cost more than Caleb's truck. Margaret asked questions designed to expose his inadequacy. What books had he read recently? What did he think of the current administration's economic policy? Had he traveled abroad? Caleb answered honestly, which seemed to surprise her more than impress her. At least you're not pretending to be something you're not, Margaret said over dessert. That's more than I can say for most of the men in Victoria's circle. Mother, Victoria said, warning in her voice. What? It's true. Those venture capital boys with their disruption talk and their casual billions, they're all performing. At least Mr. Hayes here seems genuine. His name is Caleb. He's my husband. Use it. Hey, Margaret's eyebrow raised. Touchy. Are you actually developing feelings for this arrangement? I'm developing a headache. Can we please just finish dinner? But Margaret wasn't done. She turned to Caleb. Why did you really marry my daughter? And don't give me that charity event nonsense. I read the contract terms. But see, Caleb set down his fork. Because I needed money to save my house and keep my kids fed. Because I was out of options. Because your daughter made an offer that solved my problems. Honest, good. Margaret took a sip of wine. And what do you think of her? Mother, I think she's brilliant and terrifying, Caleb said. I think she's built something extraordinary and she's willing to do whatever it takes to protect it. I think she doesn't trust easily and she probably has good reasons for that. Margaret studied him. You see her clearly. Most people only see the empire. Most people aren't living in her apartment. Fair point. Margaret stood. Well, You'll do, I suppose. Better than I expected, anyway. Victoria, call me this week. We need to discuss the board situation. After Margaret left, Victoria poured herself a second glass of wine and sat back in her chair looking exhausted. That was fun, Caleb said. She likes you. That's unfortunate. Why unfortunate? Well, because now she'll expect this to last beyond 60 days, and I'll have to disappoint her again. Victoria drained half the glass. My mother wanted me to marry Preston Whitmore. Old money, right connections, completely boring. When I started Kane Technologies instead of planning a society wedding, she didn't speak to me for a year. But she came around. She came around when the company hit its first billion in valuation. Money has a way of softening disapproval. Victoria stood. I'm going to bed. Tomorrow we have the hospital fundraiser. I'm going to... Natalie's having a dress delivered for... Why are you looking at me like that? You said dress? I don't wear dresses. Not for you, for me. You're wearing a tuxedo. I've never worn a tuxedo in my life. Then tomorrow will be educational. The tuxedo arrived at noon, fitted perfectly by whatever dark magic Victoria's team employed. Caleb put it on and felt like a fraud. The fundraiser started at 7, which gave him all afternoon to dread it. Victoria emerged from her room at 6:30 in a black dress that probably cost more than Caleb's annual income used to be. Her hair was down for the first time since he'd met her, and the effect was startling. She looked softer, more human, almost approachable. You clean up well, she said, adjusting his bow tie with efficient fingers. So do you. Don't sound so surprised. She stepped back, examined him critically. Remember the rules. Stay close to me, smile pleasantly, don't monopolize conversations. If someone asks about business, defer to me. If someone asks about our relationship, keep it vague but warm. Vague but warm, got it. The fundraiser was held in a hotel ballroom that looked like something out of a movie. Crystal chandeliers, gilded walls, people in formal wear that cost more than most people's rent. Caleb walked in next to Victoria and felt every eye turn toward them. Smile, Victoria murmured. You look like you're facing a firing squad. I feel like I'm facing a firing squad. These people can smell fear. Don't give them the satisfaction. They made their way through the crowd, Victoria stopping to greet people Caleb didn't recognize. Board members, investors, competitors. Everyone wanted a moment with her, and everyone looked at Caleb with thinly veiled curiosity. So you're the husband, one man said, extending his hand. Richard Costa. I'm on Kane Tech's board. Caleb shook his hand. Caleb Hayes. Yes, I've heard. Quite the unusual arrangement. We prefer to think of it as modern. Richard laughed, but his eyes were calculating. Victoria's always been ahead of the curve, sometimes too far ahead for her own good. Meaning innovation is admirable, but stability matters too, especially in leadership. Victoria appeared at Caleb's elbow. Richard, are you boring my husband with board politics? Just making conversation. Boy, yes, mate. Make it with someone else. Victoria steered Caleb away, her hand tight on his arm. That's one of Carmichael's allies. Don't engage with him. Who's Carmichael? The man trying to take my company. I told you about him. You said someone was trying to take your company. You didn't say his name, Ian. Victoria stopped walking, turned to face him. David Carmichael. He owns 23% of Kane Tech. Used to be my mentor until he decided I was too aggressive, too risky, too female. Now he's convinced the board I'm a liability. Is that why you did this? The marriage? Woo? That's exactly why I did this. The marriage restructures my assets in a way that makes a hostile takeover nearly impossible. She glanced around the ballroom. He's here somewhere. She glanced, probably watching us, looking for cracks. Then let's not give him any. They spent the next hour circulating, Victoria introducing Caleb to people whose names he immediately forgot. He smiled, made small talk, tried not to feel like an imposter in a tuxedo that fit too well. A few people asked pointed questions, how they'd met, how long they'd known each other, whether this was as sudden as it seemed. Caleb gave the rehearsed answers and tried to sound natural. Dinner was served at tables set for 12. Caleb found himself seated next to a woman in her 50s who introduced herself as Linda Brennan, Chief Operations Officer of some pharmaceutical company.
So, Linda said once they'd been served the first course, "You're the mechanic who married the Ice Queen." "I'm a mechanic who married Victoria Kane, yeah." "And?"
What's she like when the cameras aren't on? Caleb cut into his salmon, buying time to figure out how to answer.
"She's intense, focused, cares deeply about her work." That's a diplomatic answer. It's an honest one. Linda smiled.
"You're different than I expected. Most trophy spouses are all charm and no substance. You seem like you have substance. Is that your professional assessment?"
Yes. That's my human assessment. Linda took a sip of wine. "Fair warning, this crowd will eat you alive if you let them. They see vulnerability as opportunity." "Thanks for the tip."
"Don't thank me yet. I'm one of them." But she said it kindly. Across the table, Victoria was deep in conversation with a silver-haired man Caleb didn't recognize. Her expression was controlled, but he was starting to recognize the tells. The slight tightening around her eyes when someone said something that irritated her. The way her fingers tapped against her wine glass when she was calculating her next move. The speeches started after dinner. Hospital administrators thanking donors, doctors sharing patient success stories. The kind of feel-good content designed to open checkbooks. Victoria was called to the stage to accept an award for corporate philanthropy. Apparently, Kane Technologies had donated $2 million to the children's wing. She gave a short speech about responsibility and giving back, then surprised everyone by calling Caleb to the stage.
"My husband reminded me recently that real wealth isn't measured in quarterly earnings," Victoria said, and Caleb's stomach dropped because he'd never said anything like that.
"It's measured in the lives we impact. The children who'll benefit from this new wing, that's the kind of return on investment that actually matters." Applause filled the ballroom. Caleb walked onto the stage feeling like he was walking into a trap, stood next to Victoria while cameras flashed. She took his hand, the first time she'd initiated physical contact, and held it while posing for photos. Her palm was cold, her grip firm, and Caleb had no idea what game she was playing. Backstage, once the cameras stopped flashing, she dropped his hand like it burned. "What was that?" Caleb asked. "That was strategy. Richard Costa was watching. I needed to show him we're credible." "You used me as a prop." "Yes, that's what you're here for." She started walking toward the exit. "Car's waiting. Let's go." The ride back to the apartment was silent. Caleb stared out the window at the city sliding past, trying to process the evening. He'd been paraded around like a show pony, used to score points in corporate warfare he didn't understand, made to smile for cameras while feeling completely hollow inside. Back at the apartment, Victoria kicked off her heels and headed straight for her office. "We need to talk," Caleb said. "Tomorrow. I have work to finish." "Now." Victoria stopped, turned. "Excuse me? You don't get to use me and then dismiss me. I'm not your employee." "Actually, you are. That's exactly what the contract makes you. The contract makes me your husband. The contract makes you my temporary legal spouse in exchange for financial compensation. Don't romanticize it." Caleb took a step closer. "I'm not romanticizing anything, but if this is going to work, you need to treat me like a human being, not a chess piece. I treat you exactly how I treat everyone in my life, as assets that serve a purpose." "That's sad." Victoria's expression hardened. "I didn't ask for your pity." "Good, because I'm not giving it. I'm giving you basic respect, which is apparently more than you know how to receive." They stood in the hallway, the silence stretching between them like a challenge. Finally, Victoria said, "What do you want from me?" "Communication. Before you pull me on stage, before you use me to make a point, just tell me what's happening. I can play along, but I need to know the play." Victoria was quiet for a moment. Then she nodded, once. "Fair. I'll brief you better." "Thank you." She started to leave again, then stopped. "You did well tonight. Better than I expected." "That seems to be a theme." "Don't let it go to your head. You're still woefully out of your depth." "Yeah, well, you're still terrible at basic human interaction, so I guess we're even." Something that might have been a smile flickered across Victoria's face. Good night, Caleb. Good night, Victoria. The next 2 weeks fell into a strange rhythm. Breakfast together at 7, where they'd review the day's schedule, and Victoria would brief him on who he might encounter and what he needed to know. Caleb spent his mornings reading about business and technology, trying to understand the world he'd been dropped into. Afternoons were for media appearances, a charity lunch here, a networking event there, always with Victoria by his side and cameras capturing every moment. Evenings were harder. They'd have dinner together because the staff expected it, the social media presence demanded it, the performance required it. Sometimes they'd talk, careful conversations about safe topics like books or current events. Sometimes they'd eat in silence, the weight of pretending pressing down on both of them. 3 weeks in, Caleb got his first visit with Sarah and Marcus. Victoria's driver took him to Riverside on a Saturday morning, the city giving way to countryside that looked like home. Mrs. Patterson's house was warm and cluttered, the exact opposite of Victoria's sterile apartment. "Dad!" Marcus launched himself at Caleb the moment he walked through the door. Sarah hung back, trying to look cool, but Caleb could see the relief in her eyes. They spent the day at the local park. Marcus talked about soccer nonstop. They were having a good season. He'd scored 2 goals last week. The coach said he was improving. Sarah was quieter, watching Caleb like she was trying to figure out if he was different now. "Are you okay?" she asked when Marcus ran off to play on the swings. "I'm fine." "You look tired. It's a lot. The appearances, the performing, pretending to be someone I'm not. Is she mean to you?" Caleb thought about Victoria's cold efficiency, her strategic use of him as a prop, the way she treated human connection like a weakness to be avoided. "No, she's just different. She lives in a different world." "Do you like her?" "I don't know her well enough to like her." "But you're married to her. On paper." Sarah was quiet for a moment, then Mom called. Caleb's chest tightened. What did she want? "What?" "To talk to us. She saw you on TV, said she was surprised you'd sold out like that." Sarah's voice was bitter. "I told her she didn't get to judge you after she left us with nothing." Sarah, "No, Dad. She doesn't get to criticize. You did what you had to do for us. She ran away when things got hard. That's not the same thing." Caleb pulled his daughter close. "I'm sorry you had to deal with that." "I'm not. I told her the truth." Sarah leaned against him. "Just promise me you're taking care of yourself, that you're not losing yourself in all of this." "I promise." But driving back to the city that evening, Caleb wasn't sure he could keep that promise. Every day he spent in Victoria's world, he felt himself changing, becoming more guarded, more calculating, less like the man who'd raised his kids to value honesty and integrity above everything else. The apartment felt colder than usual when he got back. Victoria was in her office, door closed, light visible underneath. Caleb changed into comfortable clothes and made himself tea in the kitchen he barely used. He was sitting at the counter when Victoria emerged, looking exhausted. "How are your children?" she asked. "Good. Marcus is doing well in soccer. Sarah's worried about me." "Right? Emily was a smart kid." Victoria opened the refrigerator, stared at its contents like they might tell her something. "I have a board meeting Monday. Carmichael's making his move." "What kind of move?" "Vote of no confidence. He's convinced 3 other board members to support him. If he gets one more vote, he can force me out as CEO." Caleb set down his mug. "Can he do that?" "Technically, yes. Practically, he's been planning this for months. The marriage bought me time by restructuring my assets, but it didn't eliminate the threat." She closed the refrigerator without taking anything. "I need to flip one of his supporters before Monday." "How?" "I don't know yet." For the first time since Caleb had met her, Victoria looked uncertain. "I've run every scenario, every leverage point, every possible angle, and I can't find a clean solution." "Osh." "What happens if he succeeds?" "I lose my company. The thing I've spent 15 years building gets handed over to a man who thinks women should smile more and take fewer risks." She laughed, but it sounded hollow. "The irony is, I took the biggest risk of my life marrying you, and it might not be enough." "You this." Mboka. Caleb didn't know what to say. Comfort wasn't something they did. Vulnerability wasn't part of their contract. But sitting there in the cold kitchen, watching this brilliant, terrifying woman admit defeat felt wrong. "Tell me about the board members," he said. "The ones Carmichael convinced." "Why?" "Because maybe you're too close to see something. Talk it through with me." "What?" That's right, I bought. Victoria looked at him like he'd suggested something insane. Then slowly she sat down across from him. "Richard Costa. You met him at the fundraiser. He's risk-averse, wants steady returns, thinks I'm too aggressive. Can you convince him you'll be more conservative?" "No, because I won't be, and he'd see through the lie." "Okay, next." "Patricia Drummond. She's been on the board since my father recruited her. Loyal to the family legacy, thinks I'm destroying what my father built." "What did your father build?" "A mid-sized software company that was dying when I took over. I transformed it into what it is now, but Patricia only sees change as betrayal. Is there a way to show her you're honoring the legacy while moving forward?" Victoria was quiet. "Maybe. I'd have to frame the vision differently. Show her the through line instead of the disruption." They talked for 2 hours. Victoria laid out the board dynamics, the competing interests, the personal grudges and professional ambitions that shaped every vote. Caleb asked questions that probably sounded naive to her, but sometimes naivety found angles that strategy missed. "You should sleep," Victoria said finally, glancing at her watch. It was past midnight. "I've kept you up too late." "I don't mind. You've been helpful. Thank you." It was the first time she'd thanked him for anything beyond showing up. Caleb nodded. "Good luck Monday." "I don't believe in luck. I believe in preparation." "Then I hope you're prepared." The board meeting was Monday at 9 a.m. Caleb wasn't invited. Spouses didn't attend corporate warfare. But Victoria briefed him over breakfast about what she was planning. She was going to appeal to Patricia Drummond directly, frame the company's growth as evolution rather than revolution, position herself as building on foundation rather than tearing it down. "Will it work?" Caleb asked. "I don't know. Patricia's proud. She doesn't like being courted." "Then don't court her. Respect her. Ask for her wisdom instead of her vote." Victoria paused, coffee cup halfway to her lips. "That's not bad advice. I have my moments." She left at 8:30 in full armor. Power suit, hair pulled back, expression that could cut glass. Caleb spent the morning trying to distract himself with reading, with calling Sarah and Marcus, with anything except watching the clock. At noon, his phone buzzed. Text from Victoria. "It worked. Patricia voted with me. Carmichael lost." Caleb stared at the message, then typed back. "Congratulations." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, "Thank you. For last night. You saw something I missed." That evening, Victoria came home with champagne and the closest thing to a genuine smile Caleb had seen on her face. "We're celebrating," she announced. "Your company?" "My company? Still mine." She poured 2 glasses, handed one to Caleb. Patricia Drummond called Carmichael a dinosaur in front of the entire board. It was beautiful. "How did you get her there?" "I asked for her guidance. Told her I valued the foundation my father built and wanted her help preserving it while adapting to new markets. She practically wrote my entire strategic vision on the spot." Victoria took a sip of champagne. "It was your suggestion, the respect angle. Glad it worked." They drank in the living room, the first time they'd occupied the space together outside of photo opportunities. Victoria seemed lighter, almost relaxed. The armor had cracks. "Can I ask you something?" Caleb said. "You can ask. I may not answer." "Why did you really choose me? Out of all those applications?" Victoria was quiet for a moment. "Because your essay was honest. Everyone else tried to sell me a story. You just laid out the facts. No manipulation, no appeal to emotion, just truth." She refilled her glass. "And because you looked like you'd already lost everything, which meant you had nothing left to protect except your children. That kind of desperation is reliable." "That's bleak." "That's realistic." She looked at him. "Why did you really say yes? And don't tell me it was just the money." Caleb thought about it. "Because I was tired of failing. Because my daughter was right that pride doesn't feed my kids. Because I wanted to prove I could do something hard and survive it. Are you? Surviving it? Some days better than others. Victoria raised her glass. To survival, then. To survival. They touched glasses, the sound sharp and clear in the quiet apartment. And for just a moment, sitting there drinking champagne they'd earned together, Caleb felt like maybe they weren't just business partners pretending to be married. Maybe they were two people trying to survive their own separate wars who'd accidentally become allies. The feeling didn't last. The next morning, Victoria was back to cold efficiency, reviewing his schedule over breakfast like he was an employee instead of the person she'd shared champagne with the night before. But something had shifted. A door had opened slightly, and Caleb had seen something behind Victoria's armor that looked almost human. He just didn't know what to do with that information. The shift was subtle at first. Victoria started asking Caleb's opinion on things that didn't directly involve him. A potential acquisition deal, a marketing campaign, whether the new CFO candidate seemed trustworthy in his interview. Small things that suggested she valued his perspective, even if she'd never admitted out loud. You have a way of seeing people, she said one morning over breakfast, reviewing a portfolio of executive candidates, past the performance they're putting on. Comes from years of dealing with customers who lied about what was wrong with their cars, Caleb said. You learn to read what people aren't saying. And what am I not saying? He looked at her across the table. She was wearing another suit, armor firmly in place, but there was something in her eyes that looked like genuine curiosity. That you're exhausted. That winning the board fight didn't feel as good as you thought it would. That you're wondering what comes after you've conquered everything you set out to conquer. Victoria set down her coffee cup carefully. That's uncomfortably perceptive. You asked. I'm regretting it now. But she didn't sound angry, just exposed. The second visit with Sarah and Marcus came at the end of week 5. Caleb had been counting down the days like a prisoner marking time. Victoria's driver dropped him off at Mrs. Patterson's house on a Saturday morning that smelled like autumn and possibility. Marcus had grown half an inch. Sarah had gotten her braces off, and both of them looked at Caleb like he'd been gone for years instead of weeks. You look different, Sarah said, studying his face. Different how? I don't know. Older maybe? Tired. This whole thing is tiring. They went to the park again. But this time, Sarah wanted to talk more than Marcus wanted to play. She sat next to Caleb on a bench while Marcus kicked a soccer ball against a tree. Are you happy? She asked. I'm surviving. That's not what I asked. Caleb watched his son play, all that easy joy and uncomplicated energy. No, I'm not happy, but happy wasn't part of the deal. Is she treating you okay? She's treating me exactly how the contract says she should. Professional, distant, fair. That sounds lonely. It is. Caleb put his arm around his daughter. But it's temporary. 40 days left. Then I come home, we figure out what's next, and this whole weird chapter closes. Sarah leaned against him. What if you don't want it to close? What do you mean? I mean, what if you actually like her? What if this becomes real? Caleb's chest tightened. It's not going to become real. She doesn't want that, and neither do I. You sure about that? Sarah, I'm just saying, Dad, you talk about her differently than you used to, like she's a person now instead of just your boss. She is a person. Exactly. Sarah sat up, looked at him directly. Just be careful. I don't want you getting hurt when this ends. The conversation stayed with Caleb on the drive back to the city. He stared out the window at landscape turning into skyline and tried to figure out when Victoria had. Stopped being just the woman paying him and started being someone he thought about when she wasn't around. Back at the apartment, he found Victoria in the kitchen making tea, which was unusual. She usually holed up in her office on Saturday nights. Your children well? She asked without turning around. Yeah, growing fast. That's what children do. She poured 2 cups, slid one across the counter to him. I have something to tell you. Monday, there's a profile piece running in Business Week about us. The writer interviewed me last week. You didn't mention that. I handled it, but she's requesting an interview with you as well. Wants the husband's perspective on marrying into wealth. Caleb took the tea. What did you tell her about me? The truth. That you're more capable than you look. That you've surprised me. Victoria met his eyes. That this arrangement has been more complicated than I expected. Complicated how? She didn't answer right away. Just sipped her tea and looked at him like she was trying to solve an equation that kept changing variables. You're not what I planned for. Neither are you. What's that supposed to mean? It means I expected you to be cold and calculating all the way through, but you're not. You're just scared. Victoria's expression hardened. I'm not scared. You're terrified of losing control, of trusting people, of letting anyone close enough to hurt you. That's why you built all this, he gestured at the expensive apartment around them, as a fortress, to keep everyone at a safe distance. You don't know anything about me. Yes, Meika. You. I know you drink your coffee black with 2 sugars. I know you get 3 hours of sleep on a good night because you're in your office at 3 a.m. reading market reports. I know you call your mother every Sunday even though the conversations make you tense. I know you reorganize your desk when you're anxious and you tap your fingers when you're calculating your next move. I know more about you than you think. Victoria was very still. Those are just observations. They're the truth. And the truth is you're lonely, Victoria. You've won everything you set out to win, and you're still lonely. Stop. Why? Because it's accurate. Because it's none of your business. Her voice cracked slightly. You're here to play a role, not psychoanalyze me. Maybe I'm doing both. She set down her cup hard enough that tea sloshed over the rim. This is exactly why I don't do this. Why I don't let people in. Because they think they know you, think they understand you, and then they use it against you. I'm not using anything against you. I'm just telling you what I see. Well, don't. Keep your observations to yourself and focus on what you're being paid for. Victoria left the kitchen, her footsteps sharp on the hardwood floor. Caleb heard her office door close with more force than necessary. He sat alone with 2 cups of tea and the feeling that he'd crossed a line he hadn't meant to cross. But everything he'd said was true, and maybe that was the problem. The Business Week interview happened Monday afternoon in a coffee shop near Kane Technologies. The reporter was a woman named Amanda Chen, early 40s, sharp eyes that missed nothing. So, Mr. Hayes, she said once they'd settled into a corner booth, how does it feel to marry a billionaire? Strange, surreal, not something I ever imagined doing, but you did it anyway. I did it because the opportunity was there, and I needed what she was offering. Amanda's pen moved across her notepad. And what was she offering? Beyond the obvious financial compensation? A way forward. I'd lost everything, my business, my savings, my sense of being able to provide for my kids. Victoria gave me a chance to rebuild. By selling yourself. Caleb met her eyes. By entering into a legal agreement between 2 adults. People trade time for money every day. This is just more honest about it. Your daughter is 13, correct? How does she feel about this arrangement? She understands why I did it. She's a practical kid. And your son? Marcus is 9. He thinks it's an adventure. Amanda leaned forward slightly. Some people are calling this prostitution dressed up in legal language. What would you say to that? I'd say those people don't understand the difference between sex work and a contractual marriage. This is business, nothing more. Is it, though? Amanda's smile was knowing. You live together. You appear in public as a couple. You're legally bound. At what point does the performance become reality? It doesn't, because we both know what this is. And what is it? Temporary, strategic, beneficial to both parties. But saying it out loud made Caleb feel like he was trying to convince himself as much as her. The article ran Wednesday morning. Caleb read it on his phone over breakfast while Victoria worked through emails on her laptop. The piece was balanced but pointed. It painted Caleb as sympathetic, a struggling father who'd made a hard choice, while questioning Victoria's ethics in essentially purchasing a spouse. The comment section was brutal, full of people calling him a gold digger and her a heartless manipulator. Well, Victoria said, scanning her own copy, that could have been worse. Could it? She could have dug into your ex-wife. She could have questioned your parenting. She could have implied you're taking advantage of your children's sympathy. Victoria set down her phone. This is manageable. Half these comments are calling me a prostitute. Welcome to public life. Everyone has an opinion, and most of them are wrong. She stood, gathering her things for work. Ignore it, engage with it, and you give it power. But Caleb couldn't ignore it. He spent the morning reading through hundreds of comments, each one chipping away at whatever dignity he'd been trying to maintain. By noon, he felt sick. By 2 p.m., he'd shut off his phone and was sitting in the apartment's gym, running on a treadmill like he could outrun the judgment. Victoria found him there at 6, still running, shirt soaked with sweat. "How long have you been at this?" she asked. "Few hours." "You'll injure yourself." "Don't care." Victoria reached over and hit the emergency stop button. The treadmill slowed, forcing Caleb to stop. He stood there breathing hard, hands on the rails, feeling like his chest might crack open. "Talk to me," Victoria said quietly. "About what? About how everyone thinks I'm a whore? About how my daughter's going to read those comments and be ashamed of me? About how I traded my self-respect for money, and now the whole world knows it?" "You traded 2 months of your life for your children's security. That's not shameful." "Feels shameful." Victoria was quiet for a moment. Then, "When I was 25, I had to fire 300 people in one day. The company was bleeding money, and I had no choice. I stood in a conference room and told people they were losing their jobs right before Christmas. Some of them cried. Some of them threatened me. All of them looked at me like I was a monster." She met his eyes. "The board praised me for making tough decisions. The business press called me ruthless and efficient. And I went home that night and threw up because I felt like I'd become everything I'd promised myself I'd never be." Caleb stared at her. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because doing hard things doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you human. And humans survive by making impossible choices and living with the consequences." "That's bleak. That's life." She handed him a towel. "Shower. We're having dinner with Natalie and her husband tonight. You need to look presentable." "I don't want to go out." "I don't care what you want. Part of this arrangement is maintaining appearances, and that means showing the world you're not cowering from their judgment." Her voice softened slightly. "Shower. Put on the navy suit. Let me handle the rest." Dinner was at a restaurant that had a 6-month waiting list for reservations. Natalie's husband was a quiet man named James who worked in education and seemed genuinely kind. They talked about normal things, upcoming elections, a new exhibit at the art museum, whether the city should invest in better public transportation. Nothing about business or contracts or internet comments. Halfway through the meal, Natalie excused herself to take a call. James leaned forward. "I know this is none of my business," he said to Caleb, "but are you doing okay? You seem tense." "I'm fine." He read the article comments, Victoria said. "He's taking it personally." "Don't take this the wrong way," James said. "But of course he's taking it personally. People are commenting on his life choices. That's deeply personal." Victoria frowned. "It's noise. It doesn't matter." "It matters to him." James looked at Caleb. "My advice? Let yourself feel it. The shame, the anger, whatever's there. Trying to logic your way past emotions just makes them louder." "That's terrible advice, Victoria." Victoria said, "That's human advice, which is something you could stand to learn about." But James said it gently, like he'd had this conversation with his wife 100 times. When Natalie returned, they shifted to safer topics. But Caleb kept thinking about what James had said. Let yourself feel it. He'd been so focused on surviving this arrangement that he'd forgotten he was allowed to feel the weight of it. Back at the apartment that night, Victoria poured them both wine without asking. "James thinks I'm emotionally stunted," she said, handing Caleb a glass. "Are you?" "Probably, but it's kept me effective." "Has it, though, or has it just kept you alone?" Victoria sat down on the couch. Not her usual chair, but the couch, close enough that their knees almost touched. "You're doing it again. The uncomfortable honesty thing. Should I stop? I don't know." She took a long sip of wine. "When I was 16, my father told me that emotions were liabilities in business, that successful people learned to compartmentalize, to separate what they felt from what they needed to do. I took that advice seriously, maybe too seriously." "What happened when you were 16? "I lost someone I cared about, a boy I was dating. He died in a car accident." Her voice was flat, reciting facts. My father's advice was to focus on my studies, not to let grief derail my future. So that's what I did. Compartmentalized. Moved forward, built everything I have now. Victoria, I'm not looking for sympathy. I'm explaining why I am the way I am. Why this, she gestured between them, is difficult for me. I don't know how to do connection without it feeling like a weakness. Caleb set down his wine glass. Connection isn't weakness, it's just scary. Same thing. No. Weakness is something that breaks you. Fear is just your brain telling you something matters. He shifted to face her more directly. You're afraid I matter, that this matters, that when it ends in 35 days, you're going to feel something about it. Victoria's eyes were bright, almost glassy. You're supposed to be temporary. I know. You're not supposed to. She stopped, shook her head. This isn't in the contract. No, it's not. They sat in silence, the admission hanging between them like something fragile. Finally, Victoria stood, set down her wine glass with shaking hands. I need to work, she said. Victoria, please, just let me work. She disappeared into her office, and Caleb sat alone on the couch, wondering when exactly this had stopped being an arrangement and started being something else entirely. The next morning, Victoria was back to cold professionalism. Breakfast was a review of his schedule, a charity lunch, a photo shoot for a lifestyle magazine, an evening gala. She didn't mention that her conversation from the night before, and Caleb didn't push, but something had changed. The way she looked at him during the photo shoot, adjusting his tie with fingers that lingered just slightly too long. The way she laughed at something he said during the charity lunch, genuine and unguarded for just a moment before she caught herself. The way she found excuses to touch him, hand on his arm, fingers brushing his shoulder, like she was testing whether the connection they'd admitted to was real. The gala that evening was for arts funding, held in a museum after hours. They walked through galleries filled with paintings and sculptures while people in expensive clothes discussed market trends and vacation homes. Caleb felt out of place until Victoria slipped her hand into his. For appearances, she murmured, but her palm was warm against his, and when he squeezed back, she didn't let go. They stopped in front of a painting, abstract colors that didn't form any recognizable shape. A woman next to them was explaining its meaning to her companion, using words like deconstructed form and postmodern commentary. What do you see? Victoria asked Caleb quietly. Honestly, I see paint that someone threw at a canvas and called art. She laughed, actually laughed, and the sound was so unexpected that people turned to look. That's exactly what it is. But it sold for $2 million, so someone saw value in the chaos. Do you see value in it? I see calculated randomness, which isn't really random at all. She tilted her head, studying the painting. Everything that looks spontaneous is usually planned, even chaos. Is that what we are? Calculated randomness? Victoria's hand tightened in his. I don't know what we are anymore. Before Caleb could respond, David Carmichael appeared from the crowd like a shark sensing blood. He was in his late 50s, silver-haired, wearing the kind of confidence that came from old money and older connections. Victoria, he said, his smile sharp. And the infamous husband, how delightful. David, Victoria's voice went ice cold. Enjoying the exhibition? Immensely, though I find the real art is watching you perform domestic bliss. His eyes moved to their joined hands. Quite the production. It's called a marriage. You've had 3 of them. Surely you remember the concept. Oh, I remember. I also remember that yours came with a rather convenient restructuring of assets right before a board vote. Carmichael's smile widened. Funny how that worked out. Funny how you lost that vote. For now, but arrangements like yours have a tendency to fall apart. And when they do, he leaned closer. I'll be ready to pick up the pieces. Victoria's expression could have frozen water. Stay away from my company, David. It's not your company. It's a publicly traded corporation with a board of directors who are increasingly concerned about their CEO's judgment. He nodded to Caleb. No offense, Mr. Hayes. I'm sure you're a lovely person, but marrying someone for strategic purposes tends to backfire spectacularly. He walked away, leaving tension in his wake. Victoria's hand was gripping Caleb's hard enough to hurt. Breathe, Caleb said quietly. I'm going to destroy him. Later, right now we're at a charity gala and people are watching. Victoria forced her expression to smooth out, the mask sliding back into place. But Caleb could feel her trembling. They left early, citing Victoria's headache. In the car ride home, she stared out the window at the city lights, silent and rigid. "He's baiting you," Caleb said. "Don't let him get in your head. He's right, though. This arrangement is unstable. When it ends, he'll use it to prove I'm reckless." "Then don't let it end badly." "How?" "The contract expires in 33 days. We divorce. There's no version of this that doesn't hand him ammunition." Caleb didn't have an answer, because she was right. They'd set an expiration date on this from the beginning, and now that date was approaching like a deadline they couldn't extend. Back at the apartment, Victoria poured herself a drink, something stronger than wine, and stood at the windows looking out at her conquered city. "I hate that he's right," she said. "I hate that I let my emotions compromise my strategy." "What emotions?" She turned to face him, and her expression was raw in a way he'd never seen. "You know what emotions. Don't make me say it." Caleb crossed the room to stand in front of her. "Victoria, No, don't. Don't try to fix this or make it easier or pretend it's not happening." Her voice cracked. "I wasn't supposed to care about you. You were supposed to be an asset, a strategic move, a temporary solution. But somewhere between the board meetings and the champagne, and you seeing through all my defenses, you became something else. Makin dichki gepots. What did I become? Someone I think about when I should be working. Someone whose opinion matters more than it should. Someone who makes me question every wall I've built and wonder if I built them too high." Caleb reached for her hand. She let him take it, her fingers cold against his. "I care about you too," he said quietly. "More than the contract says I should. More than makes sense given the circumstances. And I don't know what to do about it either." We do nothing. We finish the contract. We end this before it gets messier. "Is that what you want?" Victoria pulled her hand back. "What I want doesn't matter. What's strategic matters. What protects the company matters. What keeps me from making catastrophic mistakes matters." Caring about someone isn't a catastrophic mistake. It is when it compromises everything you've built. She set down her drink. 33 days. We can maintain the performance for 33 days. And then we end this cleanly, professionally, the way we planned. And if I don't want to end it, then you're a fool. But her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Because I will end it, Caleb. I'll end it because I have to. Because letting it continue would mean admitting I need something beyond my company, beyond my control, and I can't afford that weakness." She left him standing in the living room. She disappeared into her bedroom and closed the door with a finality that felt like a verdict. Caleb stood there for a long time, staring at that closed door, trying to figure out when exactly he'd fallen for the woman who'd hired him to pretend to be her husband, trying to figure out how to survive the next 33 days knowing that at the end of them, he'd have to walk away from something that had started as performance and become terrifyingly real. His phone buzzed. Text from Sarah. "You okay? Saw photos from the gala. You looked sad." He typed back, "I'm fine, just tired." But he wasn't fine. He was in love with a woman who'd rather lose him than admit she needed him. And there was nothing in the contract that told him how to survive that. The next morning, Victoria was gone before Caleb woke up. Her assistant texted him the day's schedule. Solo appearances. Nothing that required them to be together. The message was clear. She was avoiding him. Caleb spent the day restless, unable to focus on anything. He tried reading, tried calling Sarah and Marcus, tried working out until his muscles screamed. Nothing helped. The apartment felt emptier than it had on day one, back when he'd first arrived and thought the hardest part would be pretending to care about someone he barely knew. The irony wasn't lost on him. The hardest part turned out to be caring too much. Victoria came home late that night after 11. Caleb was still awake, sitting in the dark living room, staring out at the city. "You should be asleep," she said from the doorway. "So should you." She moved into the room but kept her distance, staying near the door like she might need to escape quickly. "We need to talk about logistics. The contract expires in 31 days. We should start planning the divorce announcement, the asset distribution, the media strategy." "That's what you want to talk about? Logistics? What else is there to talk about?"
How about the fact that you admitted you care about me? How about what happens after this ends? How about anything real? Real isn't what we agreed to. Victoria's voice was steady, but Caleb could hear the strain underneath. Real is messy and complicated and compromises everything I've worked for. Maybe everything you've worked for isn't enough. Excuse me? Yes.
Caleb stood, walked closer to her.
You've built this empire.
You've won every fight. You've proved everyone who doubted you wrong. And you're still miserable. Maybe success isn't measured in quarterly earnings and board votes. Maybe it's measured in whether you can look at yourself and actually like what you see.
You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? I spent 15 years building a business I thought defined me, lost it all, and realized the business wasn't what mattered. My kids were. The relationships were.
The human connections I'd been too busy to maintain. He took another step closer. You're so afraid of losing control that you've lost everything else. And 31 days from now, you'll still have your company and your billions, but you'll be exactly as alone as you were before you met me. Victoria's composure cracked.
Stop. Why? Because it's true? Because it hurts. Her voice broke. Because you're right.
And I hate that you're right. And I don't know how to be different than what I am. The admission hung between them, raw and painful. Caleb reached for her hand. This time she didn't pull away.
You don't have to be different, he said quietly. You just have to be willing to let someone in. I don't know how.
Then learn. With me. For the next 31 days, stop performing and just be. Victoria looked at their joined hands, her expression vulnerable in a way that made Caleb's chest ache. And then what? Day 31 arrives, and we just go back to being strangers?
I don't know,
but I'd rather have 31 real days with you than 60 fake ones.
She was quiet for a long moment.
Then, so quietly he almost missed it.
I'm scared. Me too. What if we fail? What if we don't?
Victoria pulled her hand back, but not in rejection, in thought.
I need time to think about this, about what it would mean. Okay. Don't.
She stopped, started again. Don't expect me to suddenly become someone soft and easy. I'm still going to be difficult and controlling and terrible at emotional vulnerability. I know. And you're still going to be stubborn and too honest and completely out of your depth in my world. Probably. Something that might have been a smile flickered across her face. This is insane. Yeah, it is. She left him standing there, but this time when she closed her bedroom door, it felt less like an ending and more like a pause. The next 2 weeks were different. Victoria didn't suddenly transform into someone warm and open, but the walls came down incrementally. She started telling Caleb about her day over dinner, not just the professional highlights, but the frustrations, the small victories, the moments that made her question herself. He told her about video calls with his kids, about Sarah's worry that he was changing, about Marcus's innocent questions that had no easy answers. They started spending evenings together in the living room instead of separate corners of the apartment. Sometimes they'd talk. Sometimes they'd just exist in the same space, Victoria working on her laptop while Caleb read or watched the city lights. The silence between them stopped feeling empty and started feeling comfortable. 3 weeks before the contract expired, everything fell apart. Caleb was at a coffee shop near the apartment, meeting with Patricia Morales to review the divorce paperwork that would need to be filed, when his phone exploded with notifications. Texts from numbers he didn't recognize, Twitter mentions, news alerts, all of them with the same story. The headline on Bloomberg, Kane marriage a sham? Sources claim Billionaire's wedding was strategic move to block takeover. His hands went numb. He clicked the article. Someone had leaked details of the contract. Not everything. Enough was redacted to avoid legal issues, but enough to make it clear this was a business arrangement, not a marriage. Quotes from unnamed sources about the timeline aligning with Carmichael's takeover attempt. Analysis of how the marriage had restructured Victoria's assets. Speculation about what this meant for Kane Technologies' leadership. Oh no, Patricia breathed, reading over his shoulder. This is bad. Oh, Caleb's phone rang. Victoria. Where are you? Her voice was tight with barely controlled panic. Coffee shop on 5th. I saw the... Get back here. Now, don't talk to anyone. The apartment was chaos when he arrived. Natalie was there with 3 other people Caleb didn't recognize, all of them talking over each other about crisis management and damage control and legal action. Victoria stood at the windows, her back to everyone, rigid as steel. "Who leaked it?" Caleb asked Natalie. "We don't know yet. Someone with access to the contract terms, which means either your attorney or ours." She looked exhausted. "The board is demanding an emergency meeting. Carmichael is already calling for Victoria's resignation. Can they force her out? Depends on how the board votes. If they decide this proves she lacks judgment, that she manipulated corporate structure for personal protection, that she misled investors about her personal life." Natalie rubbed her face. "This is exactly what Carmichael needed." Victoria finally turned around. Her expression was blank, all emotion locked away behind walls that looked impenetrable. "Everyone out. I need to talk to my husband alone." The room cleared quickly. When the door closed behind Natalie, Victoria didn't move from the window. "Say something," Caleb said. "What would you like me to say? That this is exactly what I feared? That I knew letting you matter was a mistake? That's not fair." "Fair?" She laughed, but it was hollow. "Nothing about this is fair. I made a calculated, strategic decision that would have worked perfectly if I hadn't—" She stopped, shook her head. "It doesn't matter now." "If you hadn't what? If I hadn't started caring whether you stayed or left? If I hadn't let you become something more than a contract clause?" Her voice rose. "I knew better. I've always known better. But you looked at me like I was more than my company, and I was stupid enough to believe it." Caleb crossed the room to her. "You are more than your company." "Prove it. Because right now I'm about to lose everything I built, and the only thing I have to show for it is a husband who was hired to play a role." The words hit like a physical blow. "Is that what you think this is? Still?" "I don't know what to think anymore." Victoria's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "The board meets in 3 hours. Carmichael has the votes. I'm going to walk into that room and watch 15 years of my life get handed to a man who thinks women should know their place. Mom." "Then fight back." "How?" "The evidence is right there in black and white. I married you to restructure my assets and block his takeover." "That's fraud, Caleb. That's everything he needed to prove I'm unfit." "It's only fraud if it's not real." Victoria stared at him. "What?" "The contract expires in 20 days. What if we don't let it expire? What if we make this real?" "You can't be serious." "I'm completely serious." Caleb grabbed her hand. "You want to prove to the board that this wasn't just strategy? That you made a choice based on something beyond corporate protection? Then choose me. Actually choose me. Not because the contract says to, not because it's strategic, but because you want to. That's insane. So is marrying me in the first place. But you did it anyway because you were willing to take a risk." He pulled her closer. "Take another risk. Bet on something that can't be quantified in earnings reports." Victoria was shaking her head, but she wasn't pulling away. "Even if I wanted to, and I'm not saying I do, it wouldn't change the optics. Carmichael would just say I'm doubling down on a bad decision." "Let him say it. You walk into that boardroom and you tell them the truth. That yes, you married me for strategic reasons, but that somewhere in the process it became about more than strategy. That you fell for someone who sees you as a person instead of a profit margin. That you're willing to fight for something that doesn't show up on a balance sheet. They'll think I'm weak. They'll think you're human, which is something you've never let them see before." Caleb cupped her face in his hands. "You're so busy being the ice queen that you forgot people connect with vulnerability, not perfection. Show them you're willing to risk something for someone. Show them that strength isn't about never needing anyone. It's about being brave enough to admit when you do." Victoria closed her eyes. "What if I fail?" "Then you fail. But you fail being honest instead of hiding behind walls." "I don't know how to do this." "Yes, you do. You've been doing it for the last 3 weeks. You just haven't admitted it out loud." She opened her eyes, and they were swimming with tears. "I'm terrified." "Good. That means it matters." Victoria kissed him then, fierce and desperate and real. Not for cameras, not for performance, just because she wanted to. Caleb kissed her back, tasting salt from tears he couldn't tell were his or hers, feeling like something had finally clicked into place. When they pulled apart, Victoria's makeup was smudged and her carefully constructed armor was in pieces around her. "I need to fix my face before the board meeting," she said. "You look perfect."
"I look like I've been crying." "Exactly." She laughed despite everything. "You're asking me to walk into the most important meeting of my life looking emotionally compromised. I'm asking you to walk in looking human."
Victoria took a shaky breath. "Will you come with me?" "I thought spouses didn't attend board meetings." "They don't, but I'm rewriting the rules." She squeezed his hand. "I need you there. Even if you can't say anything, even if you just sit in the back, I need to know you're there. Then I'm there." The boardroom was exactly as intimidating as Caleb had imagined. Long table, expensive chairs, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city Victoria had conquered. 15 people in suits that cost more than cars, all of them looking at Victoria like she was on trial. David Carmichael sat at the far end, his expression smug. Victoria. And the husband. How cozy. "This is a board meeting," one of the other members said. "Patricia Drummond, the woman Victoria had won over months ago. Mr. Hayes, you'll need to wait outside." "He stays," Victoria said firmly.
"This concerns him as much as it concerns me. That's irregular. So is leaking confidential contracts to the press. But here we are." The room went silent.
Victoria took her seat at the head of the table, and Caleb sat in a chair along the wall, trying to be invisible. "Let's dispense with the pleasantries," Carmichael said. "We've all read the Bloomberg piece. The marriage was a strategic move to block my legitimate attempt to improve this company's leadership. I'm calling for a vote of no confidence." "You're calling for a coup," Victoria said. "Let's be honest about what this is. It's a reckoning. You've made increasingly erratic decisions. The Shanghai deal that fell through, the aggressive expansion into markets we don't understand, and now this marriage farce. The board has a fiduciary duty to protect shareholders. And I have a duty to protect the company I built from being dismantled by someone who thinks innovation is a dirty word." Victoria stood, commanding the room. "Yes, I married Caleb Hayes to restructure my assets and prevent David from taking control. That's a matter of public record now, thanks to whoever violated attorney-client privilege." "Then you admit it was fraud," another board member said. "I admit it was strategic, but it wasn't fraud because it became real." Victoria looked directly at Caleb. "I hired him to play a role, but what he became was something I didn't plan for. Someone who saw past the performance I've been giving my entire life. Someone who made me question whether winning everything was worth it if I had no one to share it with." Carmichael snorted. "This is pathetic. You're actually trying to sell us a love story?" "I'm trying to tell you the truth, which is that I made a choice based on strategy, and it evolved into something based on feeling, something messy and unpredictable and completely outside my comfort zone." Victoria's voice steadied. "You want to vote me out because you think I lack judgment? Here's my judgment. Building a company is meaningless if you destroy yourself in the process. And I was destroying myself, piece by piece, year by year, until I was so isolated I thought control and loneliness were the same thing." Patricia Drummond was watching Victoria carefully. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying Caleb was right about something. Success isn't just about quarterly earnings and market share. It's about whether you can look at your life and feel like it means something beyond numbers on a screen." Victoria looked around the table. "I've spent 15 years proving I could build this company. Maybe it's time I prove I can be more than just its CEO." "You're resigning?" Carmichael's eyes lit up. "No, I'm staying. But I'm doing it as someone who's learned that admitting you need people isn't weakness, it's wisdom." She turned to the board. "Vote me out if you want. Replace me with David and watch him run this company into comfortable mediocrity. But understand what you're voting for. The illusion of stability over the reality of growth." Richard Costa spoke up. "And if we keep you, what changes?" "What?" "I bring in a COO to handle day-to-day operations. I remain CEO and strategic director, but share operational control. I implement the board oversight." Carmichael has been pushing for, not because I'm conceding to his power play, but because accountability makes us stronger. Victoria met his eyes. And I stopped pretending I have all the answers. I build a leadership team instead of a one-woman empire.
The room was silent. Then Patricia Drummond said, "That's the most mature thing I've heard you say in 15 years. Thank you, I think. I'm serious. You've always been brilliant, Victoria." But brilliance without humility becomes arrogance. What you're describing sounds like actual leadership.
Carmichael stood abruptly. This is manipulation. She's playing on your emotions. Sit down, David, Patricia said sharply. For once in your life, sit down and listen to someone who's willing to evolve. The vote happened 15 minutes later. Patricia voted to keep Victoria. Richard Costa voted to keep her. 3 of Carmichael's allies switched their votes, persuaded by Victoria's willingness to share power. The final count was 11-4 in Victoria's favor. Carmichael left the boardroom without a word, his face purple with rage. Victoria stood there looking stunned. Patricia came over, put a hand on her shoulder. That took courage, Patricia said quietly. Your father would have been proud.
My father thought emotions were liabilities. Your father was wrong about a lot of things, but he was right about you having what it takes to lead. You just needed to figure out what kind of leader you wanted to be. After everyone left, Victoria stood at the windows looking out at the city. Caleb came to stand next to her. "You did it," he said. "We did it. I couldn't have—" She stopped, swallowed hard. "Thank you for seeing something in me I couldn't see in myself." "What happens now?"
Victoria turned to face him. Now I hire a COO. I restructure operations. I prove to the board I meant what I said. She paused. And I figure out what to do about us. What do you want to do about us? Honestly, I want to tear up the contract, not to end this, to start it over. On our terms, not legal terms. She took his hand. I want to try being married to you for real. Messy and complicated and without an expiration date. What about the money? The contract payments? Keep them. You earned them. But going forward, this isn't about money. It's about whether we can build something that matters more than what either of us had before. Caleb pulled her close. That's terrifying. To your arts. Completely. But you taught me that being terrified means it's worth fighting for. They stood there together, looking out at the city that had brought them together through desperation and kept them together through something neither of them had planned for. 3 weeks later, Caleb brought Sarah and Marcus to the city for the first time. They stood in the apartment looking around with wide eyes at the expensive furniture and the windows that showed them the world from above. This is where you live? Marcus asked, pressing his nose against the glass. For now, we're actually looking at houses. Something between here and Riverside, with a yard for you to practice soccer.
Really? Marcus spun around. With both of you?
With both of us, Victoria said from the kitchen doorway. She still looked uncomfortable around the kids, still moved with careful precision like she might break them. But she was trying. Sarah watched Victoria with suspicious eyes.
So this is real now? Not just for show?
It's real, Caleb said. We're still figuring out what that means, but it's real. Good. Sarah crossed her arms. Because if you hurt my dad, I don't care how many billions you have. I'll find a way to make you regret it. Victoria actually smiled. I like her. Yeah, well, she's terrifying when she wants to be. They had dinner together, take-out pizza because Victoria still couldn't cook, and Caleb was exhausted from apartment hunting. Marcus talked about his soccer team nonstop. Sarah grilled Victoria about her business like she was preparing for a hostile takeover herself. And Caleb watched his two worlds collide and somehow managed not to destroy each other. Later, after the kids were asleep in the guest rooms, Caleb and Victoria sat on the couch in the dark living room. That was harder than board meetings, Victoria said. They're tough critics. Sarah hates me. She doesn't hate you. She's protecting me. Give her time. Victoria leaned against him.
I have no idea how to be a stepmother.
No one does. You figure it out as you go.
What if I'm terrible at it?
Then you'll be terrible at it the same way you're terrible at emotional vulnerability and cooking and trusting people. And we'll figure it out together. She was quiet for a moment. Then, I fired my therapist 6 years ago because she said I had intimacy issues.
Did you?
Obviously, but I didn't want to hear it. Victoria shifted to look at him. I'm seeing someone new now, twice a week. She says I have a lot of work to do. We all do. She also says what we have is codependent and probably unhealthy, given how it started. What do you think? Shit. I think labels are less important than whether something works. And this, she gestured between them, works. Imperfectly, messily, but it works. Caleb kissed the top of her head. Yeah, it does. 6 months later, they got married again. Real marriage this time, in a small ceremony with Sarah and Marcus as witnesses, Patricia Morales as officiant, and Natalie crying in the front row. No press, no performance, just two people who'd found each other through the most unlikely circumstances and decided to keep choosing each other anyway. Victoria wore a simple dress instead of a suit. Caleb wore the same tuxedo from the hospital fundraiser because it fit and he'd grown fond of it. Sarah and Marcus stood next to them looking uncomfortable in formal clothes but genuinely happy. When Patricia asked if they took each other as husband and wife, they both said, I do, like they meant it, which they did. This time with feeling instead of strategy. The reception was at a restaurant in Riverside, Victoria's idea, wanting to honor where Caleb came from. His old customers showed up, people who'd known him his whole life, who'd watched him struggle and fail and survive. They looked at Victoria like she was an alien, and she looked at them like they were speaking another language, but everyone made an effort. Mike Patterson, who'd loaned Caleb the suit for that first interview, pulled him aside. She's good for you, Mike said. Still terrifying, but good. Yeah, she is. And you're good for her. She smiles now. Didn't do that in the early photos. Caleb looked across the room where Victoria was talking to Sarah, both of them looking uncomfortable but trying. We're good for each other. In weird ways neither of us planned for. Best things usually are. That night back at the new house they'd bought together, halfway between the city and Riverside, with a yard for Marcus and space for Sarah and an office for Victoria, Caleb found his wife standing at the window looking out at darkness instead of city lights. Regrets? He asked. None. You? Not even one. Victoria turned to face him. I keep waiting for this to feel wrong, for the other shoe to drop, for something to prove this was all a mistake. And it keeps feeling right, which is terrifying in its own way. Caleb pulled her close. Get used to it. We've got a lifetime of terrifying ahead of us. Good. I'd get bored otherwise. Well, they stood there together in the house they'd chosen, in the life they were building, two people who'd started as a transaction and become something neither of them had known they needed. Sarah appeared in the doorway, phone in hand. Dad, Marcus wants to know if he can paint his room blue. Tell him yes, but he has to help. Also, I need new cleats for soccer season, and Victoria, there's an email from your COO about quarterly projections. She stopped, looked at both of them. Sorry, am I interrupting? No, Victoria said. Come here. Sarah approached cautiously. Victoria put an arm around her, awkward but genuine. Thank you, Victoria said, for giving this a chance, for not making it impossible for me to be part of your family. But
you're weird, Sarah said, and sometimes you're kind of cold, and you work too much. I know, but you make my dad happy, like actually happy, not fake happy. So I guess you can stay. Victoria laughed, and it sounded real. High praise. Don't let it go to your head. Marcus came running in, already covered in what looked like paint despite not having started yet. Can we get a dog? Everyone in Riverside has dogs. No, Victoria said immediately. Please? Absolutely not. Dogs are chaotic and require emotional attachment, and we'll think about it, Caleb interrupted. Give us a few months to settle in first. Marcus whooped and ran off. Sarah followed him, yelling something about making sure he didn't paint the furniture. And Caleb and Victoria were left standing in their new living room, listening to their kids argue in the distance, feeling like they'd somehow stumbled into a life that shouldn't work but did. We're really doing this, Victoria said. The whole family thing. Yeah, we are. I'm going to be terrible at it. Probably. I'm going to make mistakes too. But we'll figure it out? We'll figure it out. Victoria kissed him, and it felt like a promise, like the beginning of something instead of the end.
Like two people who'd learned that the best things in life can't be quantified or controlled or planned for, they just have to be lived. Outside, the world kept turning. Victoria's company kept growing, this time with actual leadership instead of just her. Caleb started a consulting business helping small shops avoid the mistakes he'd made. Sarah got into a good high school and stopped looking at Victoria like an intruder. Marcus eventually wore them both down and got his dog, a rescue mutt named Chaos, who destroyed 3 pairs of expensive shoes before they learned to keep closets closed. Life wasn't perfect. Victoria still worked too much. Caleb still struggled with feeling out of place in her world. They fought about money and schedules and whose turn it was to deal with Marcus's soccer carpool. They went to therapy, separately and together, and learned how to communicate without one of them shutting down or the other pushing too hard. But they also laughed. They built traditions. They figured out how to blend 2 completely different worlds into something that belonged to both of them. And somewhere in the messy, imperfect, completely unplanned chaos of it all, they found what neither of them had been looking for when they signed that contract. They found home. Not in a place, not in success or money or proving anyone wrong, but in each other. In choosing to stay when leaving would have been easier, in believing that connection mattered more than control, in learning that sometimes the best things in life start as transactions and become transformations. And if that's not worth more than all the billions in the world, then nothing is. Because at the end of the day, we're all just looking for someone who sees us, really sees us, past the armor and the performance and the walls we've built. Someone who looks at our worst and chooses to stay anyway. Someone who makes us believe that being vulnerable isn't weakness. It's the bravest thing we can do. Victoria found that in a mechanic from a small town who had calloused hands and honest eyes. Caleb found it in a billionaire who learned that empires mean nothing if you build them alone. And together, they found something neither of them knew they were missing, the understanding that love isn't about perfection. It's about showing up. It's about trying. It's about being willing to risk everything you've built for something you can't quantify. It's about being human in a world that tells us to be invincible. And that's a lesson worth more than any contract could ever buy.